is the Licensing Committee, and I'll turn things over to Chair Gay Moon.
Okay, thank you. The first thing we need to look at is there is an agenda change for us. It is concerning the Tennessee specific ethics course information that was provided to us Friday. And I just need the committee to agree to this agenda change to add this to our agenda at the end. Do we have to vote on that, or is it just for committee? We need to vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do I have a motion from a committee member that we can change the agenda to add the Tennessee ethics course conversation?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we will add that at the last part of our committee meeting then.
Okay, can you have them vote? Just
Oh, okay.
we have a first and a second.
We have a first and a second. All right. Do we have to do a roll call vote?
Yes, because
Okay.
on the phone.
Okay.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby, Stephen Eldridge,
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we will add that after our other conversations. First item up, we have two reinstatement applications. This is not a meeting to make a determination or even to vote on a recommendation to the full board, but it is giving us an opportunity to ask questions of staff for clarification while you all are reviewing the information. The first one is Bradford Jones, and then the Jones and Associates PLLC. They have he has made a reinstatement application, and we are just discussing whether or not the application is complete. We are not approving this application. It's just this if the application is complete. So, any questions? I would like to know, does the staff feel like the application is complete?
That was exactly what I thought.
Yes.
You do.
Mr. Jones is applying for reinstatement of his individual license. It is in a revoked status, and also reinstatement for the Nashville firm permit, which is also in revoked status. Those licenses became revoked due to non-compliance with a consent order. Mr. Jones has completed the required applications and has satisfied now the terms of the consent order. So yes, we feel as though he's completed the application appropriately.
Okay. There was some issue about the firm name. One place it had Jones CPA LLC, and one was Jones and Associates. Are we okay on how the application is set up?
Yes. So when he ultimately has two locations that are permitted, and when they were permitted, he did not have multiple CPAs on staff. It was only him. So he was not allowed to use the and associates. Part of the consent order was for him to validate additional staff members and update the name as appropriate, and he has done that.
Okay. Okay.
One other question I had on that, and I just wanted to make sure I understood. Was he saying that he continued to use, even though he was in a revoked status, he was continuing to use CPA in the name of the business and online? And
During a time period, he was.
okay,
He has since made efforts to remove what he can remove. Yeah.
curious about that.
What about his email signature? I mean, there weren't any emails in the information provided, but I was curious if he had removed CPA on that.
He's been asked to. I have not checked since our conference. I can say that I went by his Gallatin location, and he has masked out the CPA on the signage right now. The signage is the same, but he's literally masked out, duct taped the certified public accountant piece of the signage.
Okay.
But he's been advised in terms of what he needs to do during this waiting period.
Any other questions? Okay, we can move on. The next is Ms. Tracy Wright. Last meeting, we had said that her application was complete, and tomorrow we'll be determining whether or not we will reinstate her license. So today, it's just asking any more questions. It's informative. We won't be making a recommendation to the full board, but if anyone has any comments or questions that need clarification, now is a good time. I believe Mr. Elmore is recusing himself of any discussion related to Ms. Wright at
Yes,
this point.
that's true.
Okay.
Is she coming in?
She has indicated she plans to be here.
I had a question about the Knoxville Zoo. We closed that, but turned it over to the DA's office. Whatever happened with? Because she indicated the case was closed and that there was no action, and to me that's a little misleading. But
I'm guessing the board did not take action because she was already in a revoked status. So it's difficult for the board to do anything else, so they sent it to the DA. To my knowledge, I've not heard anything. I'm not sure if Maria looked into that or not.
I have not looked into that, and I apologize. But I mean, I can before tomorrow's meeting. And I just feel, I do feel like though if something would have happened, we would have had some kind of record of it, but I'm not sure. I'll double check before tomorrow.
Okay.
This is an extensive file, and so I'm happy to try, any questions that you guys have. But we did work really hard to try to get the full picture for you all. So I apologize for that oversight.
Any other? Is anybody?
I was wondering, in the recommendation, we were recommending the reinstatement be conditioned on obtaining CPE. And I guess I was wondering if that would include ethics. And also I was wondering about peer review enrollment. I think she was doing a test services, but I didn't see that as any of that as part of the recommendation.
So keep in mind, I don't think we're making a recommendation, correct?
Right.
We are only recommending that if this will be completely up to the board on whether you want to reinstate or not. If you do decide to reinstate, we want to make sure you understand she has not submitted any CPE because the rule doesn't require that. So we are suggesting that if you would like to reinstate the license, that you make sure to add CPE as a condition.
Okay, that's what this area was. Okay.
And
Suggestion.
you will probably want to ask her questions about whether she wants to do a test work or not, if you consider reinstating, and then make your recommendation based on her answers. I believe part of what that memo tells you is the reinstatement is completely up to you, and you can add whatever terms you would like.
This has been going on a long time, hadn't it?
Do you have anything else you would? I mean, you guys have been dealing with this for quite a while, where we just talk about it quarterly. It seems like. So, if there's anything you'd like to add,
I've got one question. How many times did she no-show us at board meetings that we were asked her to be there?
Stephen, since I've been here, I believe it's been twice.
Okay.
One without a specific reason. I think she believes she didn't need to. And the second, she indicated, I believe, a migraine, was unable to attend.
Okay.
Any other questions? or thoughts?
Does the timeline give you enough information? Is there anything confusing about that you would like clarification? I think at the last meeting, Dr. Church had some concerns, and we tried to address those in the timeline.
I thought the timeline was very helpful, and
Okay.
it was.
And just, I guess, so that I'm sure that I read that right. It looked like she continued to do CPA work on a revoked license
Yes.
continuously. Okay.
So the complaint number that was opened up in 2018, the only reason we did not hear it was because she had a revoked license. Is that why it didn't get to us?
Yes, so that complaint and the one from 17 we had set for hearing. And please help, Stuart, help me if you think I'm misspeaking here, but we had set for hearing, and in conversations with her, agreed to dismiss the hearing if she followed the steps for reinstatement. And that was due to the fact that she felt like she had not been given proper instructions, and the board had failed to help her understand how to reinstate her license. And so we agreed that if she did the steps, that we would dismiss the hearing and we would address it at the reinstatement. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we will, maybe she'll show up tomorrow and we can ask her some questions then. All right. The next item on our agenda is related to the continuous testing. This new rule is effective January 15th, and Tennessee will be able to remove the window concept as soon as the AICPA has approved and is ready to move on, which hopefully will be July 1. Now it's going to be implementation and the transition. So how are we going to do that, ladies?
Actually, Day, I think it's one of the concerns that you had during the discussion of the rule, was basically we have a set of folks that are under the old 18-month calculation. As you all know, when you pass your first section of the exam, you then have 18 months in order to complete all parts. The way that was defined before was based on the windows. So it was six successive 3-month windows after passing that first part. And in some cases, that was a little longer than the actual 18 months. So we have folks in the pipeline that are under that. And then, of course, now the rule is changed, and the definition of that 18-month calculation is an exact time period. From the day you start, you get exactly 18 months. And so we have discussed it through legal and with NASBA. And so folks that sat for a part of the exam or passed the first part of the exam prior to January 15th will be under the prior, and anybody who sat for the exam January 15th and after will be under the new calculation. So as not to potentially hurt the people under the prior way things were done.
And it's on our website, and
we have not. We have worked with NASBA, so they will be implementing on a go-forward basis within their system. So folks are, when they log into their account, they see expiration dates for the various sections.
And it'll be based on the rule before and after.
Correct.
So do you think we're going to have any issues with dashboards like we did last quarter, where somebody was given incorrect information? And
I sure hope not.
Okay.
But I mean, the good news is that if somebody gets caught up in that for some reason, then the board does have the authority to issue an extension for the candidate. Now, keep in mind that under the new scenario, once they start under continuous testing, once you receive a fail for a section, you can immediately turn around and schedule again. So ultimately, they should be able to sit more often and have more of a chance than they did previously to pass that section.
I think our young staff in our office are excited about that change.
Good.
I think they feel like it's going to be a huge improvement.
AICPA is telling us that it was the #1 requested change or feedback that they receive on the exam.
Anything else on the continuous testing rule? Okay. The next item that was added to our agenda is the Tennessee Society's ethics course. We received Friday some feedback. It looked really good. I think everybody was pretty much very good or excellent. I only saw 1 or 2 comments that were, this is boring. But other than that, I think it went well. And this feedback was provided to us as a result of our memorandum of understanding with the Tennessee Society and the ethics course that is done. We also received some information about our increase in the fee. Does anybody have any questions or comments related to the fee increase?
I have a comment about that. I mean, we're in the first year of doing this, and my only concern about this is, we chose one vendor to provide the service, and we said that, we're going to keep the costs low and keep it controlled and all that. And if all of a sudden the first year out of the gate, we're cranked it up 20% or whatever it is, 25%. I mean, to me, while it's only $5 or whatever each, is this just the start of a new run of increases? So then eventually it's going to be back up to where it used to be. I don't know the answer to that. That would be my opinion as an outside party when I see this, thinking, well, now great, now we got a monopoly and prices are going up first year, pretty healthy percentage.
Stephen, just as a couple of comments to make sure everybody's aware, and I do think Kara's here and can maybe speak to the matter. The memorandum of understanding requires them to tell us if they're raising the fees. The board is not even authorized to approve that, but it is something you can take into consideration as you choose to approve vendors. So just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not personally complaining. I'm just saying that's probably going to be a perception that I've had a lot of people talk about the monopoly situation, and now if rates are going up that quick, that sharp, that's just hopefully it'll be okay.
I think it would be, I don't know if Kara could speak. I'm sure there are reasons for that, and there's so if Kara would kind of explain, I think that'd be great.
Just to offer just some clarifying information, Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're in the second year of this. So it began in 2018. Our fee was at $35, which was the original fee that we had presented to you all. We went through 2019. That fee remained at $35 as well. So we're in our second year with the fee at $35. When we first set that rate, we lowered it. We made a few changes to our current fee structure for the ethics course prior to the memorandum of understanding. So we lowered our fee $20. We also agreed to offer the same fee for TSCPA TSCPA members and non-members. So we made some changes. But after having 2 years under our belt, reviewing the cost that it takes from a staff standpoint of just producing the course, distributing the course, administering it, we believe that a $5 increase after 2 years is reasonable to ensure that we cover our cost and operate close to a break even on the program. We've done some comparisons in making this decision as to what our fees are compared to other states that offer or require 2-hour ethics courses, and increasing that fee by $5 would put us mid-range. There are other sponsors. So TSCPA creates this content, but as a reminder, there are 6 other sponsors that this board approved to sell the content developed by TSCPA. So in looking at those other sponsors that you all have approved, they are charging anywhere from $29 to $49. Now, there's a few of those 6 that I wasn't able to get information on as far as what their fees are, but we believe, looking at that range of $29 to $49, that our increase to $40 would put us kind of, in the middle, and not at a price that is exceeding what the kind of the market norm is at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, I was going to ask.
When did we start in 18? Did we start January 1st of 18, or was it later in the year?
January.
Was it January of 18?
It was January of 18, yes.
Okay.
I believe the memorandum of understanding.
I hope you're not taking this. I hope you're not taking this the wrong way. I'm just making an observation that, and I'll correct myself that the second year, but regardless, I've had a lot of feedback about sole source, and that's kind of just being cautious.
Well, I think there are 6 other providers, even though they're using the TSCPA material. There's 6 other providers, and they can take a lower cost course.
Don't they have to pay $500 plus $25 per participant?
For the last 2 years, there's 2 options for other sponsors. So when this board approves the other sponsors and they reach out to TSCPA, there's 2 options. They can either pay a flat fee of $5,000 and they can sell that course to as many licensees as they want to, or they can go, depending on their volume, they may opt for the second option, which is a $500 administrative fee. And then for the last 2 years, it's been $20 per person, and we are proposing a $5 increase to bump that to $25. So yes, the $500 plus $25.
Do we have a sense as to what most of those 6 providers, what option of those 2 options that most of the providers have selected?
This past year, we had 3 that went with option 1, the flat $5,000, and we had 3 that went with the second option.
The question that I wanted to ask is, it seems like you would charge more for a non-member than a member, because I was just asking that because it seems like there should be a member benefit, but that's y'all can set. If they're a member of the TSCPA.
Typically, for all of our other CP offerings, you're correct. We do charge, we have a discount for members. For this course specifically, we do not, and that was, I think, per the request of the board.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, I didn't realize.
Since it was the only approved course.
Gotcha.
Forgive my lack of knowledge on this subject.
Right. Pressure.
I'm probably covering it with my wrap. There it goes. Okay, it was on mute. In the online education process there, do y'all just ask like certain keywords or phrases to ensure people are on? They're not filling out a test at the end of that thing, right?
No. So for if they're taking the webcast video or the on-demand video, they're what we call attendance codes that appear every hour. They have to record those at the end to verify. Now, if they're taking the interactive course, it's not a test in the sense that they have to score a certain score, but there is, to move forward in the course, there are certain activities that they have to complete as they move through that.
One more question unrelated to the charges or fees for the course. Can you refresh the board members as to what the timing is for refreshing the next iteration of the course, I guess, for calendar year 2020?
Right. So I think the memorandum of understanding is that we will have the updated course during the first quarter of the calendar year. So we have already engaged an individual to update that course. I corresponded with her this morning about updates that she is making, and I have asked for that by the end of February from her, with the intent of being able to provide it to Wendy for review and to you all by the end, and have it finalized by the end of March.
Thank you. So if I don't think this would be likely given that it's in traditional busy season, but if someone were to take the course before that update is done, I guess it would be perfectly fine for them to take the existing course content. Would that be right? Or is there kind of a blackout period on that?
So per the application, sponsors are not allowed to offer the course after January 31st. So Wendy may want to speak to that.
We did ask for an update to the application last year, which allows the sponsors to use the prior content until the new content is available, because we cannot have a dark period. There are too many people that didn't get the requirement and need to fulfill it to renew, and or through the disciplinary process need to take the course.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kara or thoughts?
I wanted to ask Wendy a question on this subject. How do you feel like it's really helped? I mean, the initial purpose of considering this and moving to this type situation was to avoid you and your staff from having to review so many courses and having to basically write every course from every person who submitted. Do you feel like it's been beneficial that we've moved in this direction?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, because we just review the course once a year,
Okay.
and provide the content that we're most interested in making sure folks hear, and that it's accurate. We still get comments that it's boring or repetitive or something of that nature. So it's hard to find ways to spice it up sometimes, but it's probably our biggest challenge.
Well, I just wanted to remind everybody that's why we moved in this direction, because it was overwhelming, I think, to our staff.
Well, and quite honestly, there was just incorrect content.
Yeah.
And we don't, there's no point in having the requirement if folks aren't getting the correct information.
So I kind of was talking about this earlier, just almost in jest earlier, but I do think it's something we ought to consider. We have a very low engagement online with this board, and what we do, I feel, is important for the profession and how we govern the profession. In fact, a lot of the content that we generate for these CPEs is what comes out of these board meetings. And so I don't know the mechanism, because I'm not an IT person. I don't know how this would work, but it certainly would be nice if the people that are watching this on WebEx or whatever it is they're watching this on could do that and still get the ethics credit that we all get for attending this meeting. I'm not certain what the rule actually says. Do they have to be at the board meeting, or is it the...
It just says 2 hours of board approved ethics. So the board has the option of approving whatever they want.
So if somebody came and sat in here for 2 hours, would they get... Is that really what's required?
I mean, this board has approved that in the past,
Yeah.
so we have counted that.
It sure would be nice. I mean, I'm sitting here listening. We're just using key phrases to ensure people are participating in the online course or whatever. In the course of this committee hearing today, we could have given out 5 keywords or 4 keywords during the meeting. Someone could just speak into a microphone, and those people could then record those words and then submit those somehow for credit. I'm just saying, you talk about the boring nature of what it is the content is on there, and maybe this would be a much more interesting format for people to watch and get engaged in whatever it is we're doing. We talk at length about our legal reports. We go through these rule changes and anything that might affect. We're having these conversations about the CPE course. I just think at some point we need to probably consider, how do we engage more people with this board? We've talked in the past about going to campuses and having these meetings at other places, but online makes the most sense because it's easy to deliver. I don't know, something to consider, I think, because I think that would be good for people to engage. You wouldn't necessarily have to charge anything for it. And could be another benefit to our profession. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Thank you. I do too.
certainly look into the feasibility of that.
Right.
Do I?
I won't be here when y'all do that. That's fine.
Well, it would be interesting. Any other comments on the ethics course? Okay, I think that concludes the licensing committee meeting.
Thank you, Gay. We'll move on to the Enforcement Committee meeting, and I'll turn things over to Chair Andy Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've got in front of you the handouts of all the information that we sent out via email and also, is it not on? Here we go.
There
How
you
about
go.
that? Okay. You've got in front of you the information that we sent out just to kind of highlight a couple things. And as you saw at the last meeting, one of the first ones is an open complaints detail that does not include any complaints on the legal report. That's in front of you so that you can review what's coming down the pike. And I'll ask, is there any questions of anything on that report for Wendy and her staff or the legal team?
I'd just like to say I think this is a good report. I think we asked for this a couple of meetings ago or so, and I think this, in a very short and concise way, you can go down and review this and see, just how old some of the situations are, and if one of us had an interest in one or more that we were watching, you can see, what's happening on it. So I think it's a good report, and I appreciate staff putting it together.
Is this more helpful than the other statistics that we provide? Quite honestly, I could not. Our data's been moved to Tableau, and I haven't been able to get correct data to create that other report for this meeting.
I think it is. The only suggestion I would have, and I don't know, maybe this causes more issues than not, is could it be put in date order, like oldest first or oldest last, in the order of how old they are? So, in other words, active start date. Could you sort by oldest or youngest instead of? I don't know how it's sorted now. Is that?
It's sorted by the step in the process that they're in. So, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the seventh, 6th and 7th columns for the activity type, I have it sorted by where it is in the process.
See, well,
You could do it by total age. That kind of tells you how many days it's open.
Yeah. So this just gives you a sense. The first ones really have just been received recently that aren't highlighted. And then that group of green colored highlighted ones, those have gone to the board. The board's made a decision, and the individual has either chosen not to sign the consent order and we're waiting on hearing, or they just recently received the consent order and haven't had a chance to digest it yet. The pink area, those are folks who have signed their consent order and they have follow-up items they have to submit to us before we can officially close it. So it could be that they need a peer review or they have to pay a civil penalty. Some folks request payment plans, so we keep track of them there. And then the blue section is litigation monitoring. So those are ones we have on hold for reasons where we can't proceed because of legal matters.
I really like this format a lot better, personally.
and I'm not hung up on the chronological date thing. I mean, now that you've explained it, it might complicate it to do it the other way because you've put them in the status that they're in here. So.
Right, so you can go to the total age or the received date and pick out the older ones, and at some point, if we wanted to talk about those, we could.
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
The next part of our process is we usually go through and we look at the consent orders. Today in your legal report for January, and I believe that the date being January 28, 2019, I think that needs to be marked through and put 20 at the top. But underneath that, there's 7 consent orders. So I'll ask you, as we normally do, to take a look at those consents and ask if there's any that anybody has any questions on.
have a question on number 2,
Okay.
and this is just a question of maybe ignorance, I don't know, but on my part, I mean. The next to last paragraph says a complaint was opened by the board to determine if the violations noted extended to work performed by Tennessee offices and if any Tennessee clients were involved. Does it make a difference if there were no Tennessee clients involved? Does that make a difference in our rules?
Traditionally, in the past, with these SEC orders, the traditional, and it's not even discipline, but the traditional disposition has been a letter of warning unless a Tennessee office was specifically involved with the violations, or if another office perhaps was performing something for a Tennessee client. Basically, when we get those SEC orders, the inquiry we make is, what offices are involved if we can't tell from the SEC order. And a lot of times you can't tell from the SEC order. So we normally do letter of warning if it's there's not a Tennessee office involved. If there is, then we do a much more thorough investigation to find out where the problems is in the quality control process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
You're asking about questions on 1 through 7.
Just the consent agenda. Well, seeing no other questions, I would do I hear a motion to proceed to the underlying cases here and present them to the board tomorrow under the consent area 1 through 7.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? I think we have to have a roll call here. Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
All right, great. Now we move over to number 8, and I failed to actually bring out the other thing that's new, and that's a summary of the legal report synopsis that has the case number on our page, the category, the recommendation, and then the rationale behind it. And so it's a great little tool to go through as we go through 8 through 22 today and look at the proposed discipline. We'll start with number 8. Number 8 is a case. The complaint was opened by the Tennessee Board of Licensed Contractors, received a review report submitted by respondent, and requested a license verification. Respondent holds a CPA license. However, there is no record of enrollment in peer review program. The respondent purchased an existing CPA firm, and it was a second location for a previous firm. The respondent contends that he asked its office administrator to register a new firm and ensured the firm was registered and enrolled in peer review. Respondent takes responsibility for the error because he did not follow up by logging on the state's webcast or state board's website to confirm the information was correct. When the client received the rejection notice for the license renewal application, respondent immediately engaged another CPA firm on their behalf to prepare and submit the financial statements for the client. Respondent also immediately began the firm registration process with the board. Respondent enrolled in peer review on September the 24th, 2019. The respondent also apologized for the oversight and indicates that he now has periodic dates on his calendar to log in, verify his individual information, and review the firm's information. The recommendation from counsel is that to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty in the amount of $750 for peer review violation. Additionally, a letter warning for not having a firm permit because he immediately obtained after realizing the error. Any questions or comments? Or all right, let's go to the next one, and we'll go through each one of these. And if we find one that we need to pull out and handle separately or vote separately on it, we will. But we'll take them in order here. All right, number 9 on page 7. This is a respondent and firm compliance with CPA requirements in order to renew a CPA license. Compliance was not substantiated by documents submitted during an audit of CPE credits. Respondent notified the deficiency a total of 39 CPE hours, including 16 hours of penalty hours. were assessed, and respondent has given a due date of 9/29/19 for completion. Respondent has failed to submit CPE and has not responded to the complaint issued. Additionally, respondent has been contacted by legal and has not responded. The recommendation from counsel is to authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil liability or civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 and submission of 39 CPE hours for failure to maintain CPE and responded to the board. Any questions on that one or comments? Seeing none? Okay. Number 10. This one right here, a licensee filed a complaint against the respondent due to concerns arising from the sale of his practice to the respondent. The client alleges numerous unethical actions by the respondent during and after the sales transaction was executed. The investigator interviewed both parties to the complaint and obtained documentation from both regarding the terms of the sales agreement. Many of the allegations made in the complaint could not be substantiated or are outside the board's purview. However, there are matters that require the board's attention and review. After the sales transaction was executed, both parties agreed to amend the terms of the sale by reducing the sale price of the practice in exchange for a 5% ownership interest by the client. The application for the firm permit indicated the owner of the firm, which was accurate as of the date of the application. However, the addition of the compliant as a minority owner of the firm was never disclosed to the board, which is a violation of a rule. In addition, they changed the firm name with the Secretary of State approximately 30 days after the firm permit was issued, but never submitted the name change to the board for approval. So the recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty of the amount of $500 for failure to communicate change in ownership of the board or the firm to the board and failure to submit the firm name change to the board for approval. Any questions or comments on that matter? Oh, tough crowd today. Number 11. Here, the respondent's firm issued a peer review report to the Board of Licensing Contractors in October of 2018 and subsequently enrolled in the peer review program. Firm has been dropped from the program. October 2nd, 2019, respondent requested board staff terminate the firm permit. Additionally, respondent individual CPA license is expired. Respondent indicated that he has no mitigating factors for the lapse of peer review enrollment and will accept the consequences that the board deems appropriate. He's been suffering from a prolonged illness and accepted employment with a manufacturer and has not performed accounting services since early September 2019. It's recommended from legal that authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty of $750. Any questions or comments on that one?
I was just wondering if there's any plan at this point or even in the future to perform attest services.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, from the information we've received from it seems no. He's working at a fishing supply manufacturer at this point, and so, yeah, I don't think he has any plans to resume.
Any other questions? Okay, number 12.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
I'm not on this committee, but I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
We're doing $750 for this person and $500 for the. I'm having a problem with the amounts. Was there a method?
They're different violations.
Okay.
So this one is a peer review violation, which has typically been $750.
Okay.
Unless you have some mitigating factors that you want to lessen that. And then the other one has the one previous to this was a notification issue related to name and ownership.
Okay.
Is that, or those the two you're referring to?
Yeah, those were the two. It just with the long suffering health issue, I didn't know if $750 was excessive.
Yeah, and I consider that as well. I just tried to keep it as consistent as possible. If the board would like to consider that as a mitigating factor, that certainly would be appropriate. But I just tried for that particular violation that $750 is what the matrix says. So whatever you all think, but I think in the sake of consistency, 750 was a recommendation.
Thoughts on that?
I'm not on the committee. I just had that question, so that's all.
Any thoughts from the committee members? Seeing none? Okay, we'll move forward. Number 12, the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors is a complaint, sent a complaint. Respondent holds a Tennessee CPA license but does not hold a firm permit. The board was unable to find record of enrollment in the peer review program. Respondent indicated that the Tennessee CPA license was transferred from California and that he completed tax returns for clients. He was unaware of the requirement to enroll in the peer review program to issue review reports. Respondent apologized for the oversight and indicated that he now knows he must participate in the peer review program to issue such reports, as included in the review report for which he issued. The legal was summed up the recommendation of authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $750 and sign an exemption form within 30 days. Any questions or comments? Okay. Number 13, respondent dropped from peer review on 8/26 of 19. The board sent a certified letter to respondent on 9/2019 informing the firm to either re-enroll in an approved peer review program or submit an affidavit for peer review exemption. It was given 30 days to respond. No action was taken by the respondent. The respondent contacted the board staff on 10/28/19 stating that he had suffered a stroke during the first week of August of 2019 and requested more time to comply with the request. Per email received respondent on December 20th, 2019, the last attest report issued by the respondent was dated October 2019, 2 months after being dropped from peer review. The respondent also stated that the firm intends to continue offering attest services. No further correspondence has been received from the respondent. The last peer review completed by the respondent is for a period ending 2/29/16. The peer review for the period ending 2/28/19 was not completed before the firm was dropped. One previous complaint was filed against the respondent in 2018 with similar circumstances. The respondent dropped the peer review in August of 27 and issued a report in January of 2018. The board closed the complaint with no action because respondent demonstrated an effort to re-enroll with issuing the review report. Re-enrollment was confirmed in March of 2018. Renewal of the respondent's firm permit is being held by board staff until the respondent can demonstrate that he has re-enrolled in the peer review. The recommendation from legal is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order with the following provisions: to cease and desist all attest work until the firm is enrolled in an approved peer review program. Failure to do so will result in additional disciplinary action by the board. Respondent will re-enroll in peer review and provide proof of an accepted peer review to the board on or before August 30th, 2020. Any questions or comments?
I'm not on the committee,
Yep.
but there's no fine here. Is there a reason for that?
That was my concern.
Yeah, mine too.
I'll let Sherry speak to this as well. But the issue we had with this is that we don't actually have evidence of the attest reports.
He states he's doing a test work. I think the discussion when we were talking about it in the meeting too is the fact that the gentleman says he's had a stroke. He had surgery. He informed me he was having surgery on December 27th, and that is his rationale for the delay in getting the peer review done. So we're kind of forcing the issue here, but I feel uncomfortable talking about discipline.
Well, but he continued. He didn't have time to deal with it, but he continued to do a test work.
I would agree with that.
Understood.
That's what he represented to me in writing, that he had issued a report dated in October 2019.
But that would seem inconsistent with number 11. I mean, that one had some illness as well, but got a fine.
So with this one, I think one of the prevailing things was he says he did the engagement in October of 19, but we don't actually have that engagement. Where many of these other ones we have it, and that's fine. We just want to make sure you knew that, and that's where we kind of were on the fence. So
I think that where we asked for the cease and desist of all the test work, that we should also additionally ask there for a list of any test work that he has issued after 8/26/19 and a copy of the report. That ought to be part of that.
I had requested a copy of that October report, Andy, but he never responded to me after December 20th.
Well, then,
But I agree that that's a good recommendation.
what if we just say that if you have not done any test work since that period, they actually assign a statement indicating that he hasn't. So he's got to do one of the two, and either way, if he has, then it's going to be a problem for him.
I was going to say Karen had asked that during the renewal process as well. That's what kind of kicked this thing off. Was he tried to renew his farm permit and he was not enrolled in peer review, and that's what kicked off. And Karen at that time also communicated to the licensee that that if he's not doing a test work, that he needs to fill out the affidavit. And he said he was continuing to do test work to her as well.
I'm also not on the committee, but one question I have here is that this appears to be a repeat of a cycle of similar activity of enrolling in peer review, getting your firm permit renewed, and then dropping enrollment. And so the question I had jotted down also was, why no financial fine or assessment here or civil penalty?
I think we were all on the fence. So if that's something you'd all like to do, it is your decision.
I was going to say, I'll just echo what Wendy said. Our biggest concern when we discussed it is, yes, he told us he was doing a test work, but if we got into a formal hearing situation, we would not have a test report to show you unless he voluntarily offered that to us.
Why would it have to be him voluntarily offering that, rather than us requiring or requesting it?
You could do that.
And then I guess it seems like we gave some mitigating credit for his illness in this situation, but not in number 11. So I guess my thinking is that there should be a fine and perhaps a reduction with number 11. I know I'm digressing, but I did notice that I had a comment similar to what Gay was bringing up.
And I don't want to get too much in to the semantics of what respondents are telling us in their responses, but I will say for number 11, he just kind of flat out said he has no mitigating factors, and then threw in the prolonged illness. Whereas, I think it's 13. It's he had been in kind of a lot of communication with Sherry, and most recently we know that he had a surgery on December 27th, so I guess it was more exaggerated in that situation, but we can definitely reevaluate that. So I appreciate that.
I guess also just looking at this, wasn't it the fact that we really didn't have any evidence that he had issued a report, where the other one we did have evidence that a report had been issued, and so thus by adding the statement we're adding, we will either have evidence of a report issued, or else he would have a signature, which then if we find out after that fact, that could even be more of a penalty or more issues for him if he doesn't sign off correctly.
Can I ask a follow-up question just along that line of thinking? Can we require people to produce reports on companies? I don't even know the answer to that. As long as I've been in this, somebody has given us a copy, I think, but can we actually require that they give us the reports that they issue?
I will need to double check this, but I'm pretty sure in the rule or the statute, the language is that evidence satisfactory to the board. Is that? I think.
I'm just thinking that's kind of someone else's information, and then I'm curious how that works. I don't know.
They could redact the company's name and that kind of thing, and should.
can look a little bit further. I know that the board has the authority to go in.
Review work papers and
We
do
can review
stuff,
work
but I'm not
papers, right.
just curious, like how that works. I don't know the answer to that.
So I guess reading that just through the tea leaves there, what about if we ask for a list of the test work and maybe a copy of the test report, not the financial statements, but the report itself that was issued with the redaction of the company name?
And
Who it was issued for is not as important as the fact that they're doing the test work where they have a history of pulling out a peer review. And I went back last month or last quarter. We had the board meeting, and Trey, you were very much on that. We have way too many people in the state that are doing that, and I think it's something that we really do need to address as we go through this.
And I'm wondering if they check the box and say they're doing it, do we need any other evidence?
That's what I was just getting ready to say.
What do you need evidence of?
That's what I was just getting ready to say. I don't understand the significance of having the report in hand, because if somebody says I'm guilty, we don't ask them to prove that they're guilty.
It's like an admission that they did it.
I think the other thing that might complicate it is that he is saying he had a stroke. So the other thought, this just when you said what you said, it kind of jarred something in terms of the discussion. Is, what would we do again in a hearing setting if he said, I did that, and then he said, oh, I don't know why I said that. I was, I just had a stroke. And we were thinking a lot of what ifs there. Maybe we shouldn't have, but we did think of a lot of what ifs there. Because it's a cognitive type, issue.
I don't know how you can make any assumptions in that scenario. Is my point. Is if somebody checks a box, they check a box. If they have to come back later and say medically I didn't know what I was doing, then that's on them to prove that they didn't do it, right? That's just my 2 cents on that.
But I guess I get the consensus that we just want to ask that for a list of any attest work that they may have performed since 8/26/19, or a statement that no attest work has been performed.
And do you want to add a civil penalty?
If he has, in my opinion, I would recommend that we add a civil penalty of a minimum $750 if he has done a test work since dropping out of the Pure program on 8/26/19 to be consistent with. But I don't know that yet, because I don't know if he's broken a law in the fact that whether he has or has not issued the test work.
And I will say, we can't do a contingent consent order based on what we receive. We'll just have to be represented to the board in May with whatever information we get. Unless you want to go the other route and that you say, he's already certified that he's doing the test work by checking the box.
I'm sorry, I'm not on this committee, so I know I'm speaking a lot here. But I do feel like if somebody's just checking a box and they're doing the work, then you have a violation. Yeah. And then it's upon them to come in and say, well, no, I was mistaken. They'd have to respond to prove that that was not the case, right?
So I agree with you all. I think I was pretty conservative on this one, but I'm happy to,
And you're saying he did check the box on his application that he doesn't? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah.
Now, keep in mind, I don't know legal if this makes a difference, but we are not renewing his firm permit, and I'm not sure under what parameters I would renew the firm permit. I suppose if he becomes enrolled, then I would renew the firm permit, although he's still delinquent on the actual peer review itself. But he has an expired grace permit now. We're holding it because he has not been able to show compliance with peer review.
Right.
Would the assessment of a civil penalty kind of get his attention? And if he hadn't been doing a test work, he might say that? I'm not on the committee, but
Is that something that we can do without evidence?
Well, we have evidence. I mean,
We
he
have
said
evidence.
on the application
Yeah,
that
he signed a
performed.
statement saying
Yeah.
that he did. I don't understand why we think we need anything
Yeah.
more.
Well, I mean,
I
he
don't think
has
we need anything else either.
he has admitted that he was doing a test work, which when we send out this consent order, it's proposed. This is not something that's in stone. So if he signs it, then he admits it and he'll pay the civil penalty. But if he doesn't sign it, then he can refute it at a formal hearing. And we can also require him to give us certain documents.
One kind of related question. This is to Andy's point, Wendy. Andy mentioned that we have seen some gamesmanship being played by people enrolling and then dropping enrollment in peer review, to kind of get their firm permit and then they'll drop. So we changed our procedures with respect to firm permit renewal. And I guess, Wendy, do you have a sense yet, and it may be too early to determine, the impact, if any, where, we're basically saying you have to provide with your renewal evidence of acceptance or in peer review?
I would say on a rough guess, we have probably 20 that we're holding that haven't been able to produce what they need to produce.
Again, what the
So when a firm renews their permit, they're required to submit their most recent report and acceptance letter. Now, some folks were due over a year ago and haven't been able to supply that, so we're holding that. So we have one where their last peer review was 2016 and they can't provide the report and acceptance letter. So we have various situations going on that we're holding until we can get a better.
Do y'all open a complaint in that situation?
Well, that's kind of, this is new. So, right now we're kind of wrestling with this a little bit. We can renew them and then open a complaint, or we can continue to hold them. That means they shouldn't be practicing.
Seems like to protect the public, we may need to be more proactive than just
Right.
not doing something with it. And I'm not suggesting you're not necessarily doing anything with it, but it seems like we need to be probably a little more proactive to go after.
What do you mean by that? By opening
Well,
a
I'm
complaint?
saying I think opening a complaint,
Okay.
just because they could be out there doing work and just plead, well, I didn't know it was hell. I mean,
Right,
so,
right.
whatever. I mean, they
Or
could,
I didn't get your email
Yeah.
that I, my permit's not renewed or something like that.
right.
Yeah. Again, this is new territory. We historically have not held up renewals to much extent. And so it may be that that's what it comes to, is that we open complaints on these so we can look into the matter further.
You have to. They have to be actively licensed to open a complaint or not? Not really.
No.
Okay.
No.
You said something
but
earlier, made me think.
The issue we're dealing with is whether to renew the permits or not. And again, we could renew them and just simultaneously open a complaint because it appears that there's non-compliance going on. Or
When you say renew, what does that mean?
renew means to have an active license. So you submit
You
your
have to
application.
have it. I mean, I guess do you have to have an active license for us to open a complaint? Is that what you're saying?
No.
So why would you renew it?
I would think you'd not renew
Right,
it
we
and
have
open
not-
the complaint.
And open a complaint.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, if you've
Yeah.
got a reason for it, I'm
No,
trying
I
to
don't.
understand.
I don't have a particular reason. So
Okay.
I think it's just a process we're trying to work through and
Yeah.
navigate and try to figure out what the right thing to do is. And if the board prefers us, not prefers, but if they'd like us to hold the renewals and open a complaint, we can certainly do that and walk through those to get more information.
I think that may be something for consideration by the time we get to our next meeting in May. I mean, we'll have a sense. We'll have 5 months elapsed since many of the firms renewed. We'll have a better indication of what population we're dealing with, and then maybe can make a more informed decision to start, that series of complaints if it is needed. But I share the view that we shouldn't be renewing them, if they're not following our rules and providing the documentation they need to with respect to their peer review, acceptance, and enrollment.
So does that Is that comment saying then that the 20 that Wendy was just alluding to would not be renewed and a complaint open? Is that?
Well, I guess what I was inferring or implying was that let's not renew those until they provide what they need to provide under our revised, processes. And then let's also accumulate whatever else we have
Right,
that kind of
okay.
builds up before our May meeting, and then determine how big the scope of the problem really is, and start attacking it,
Right,
that
okay.
way.
The license or the permit is currently in an expired grace status. They have until June 30 to renew, and then it, what we call fully expires, and they have to go through a reinstatement process after that, which in terms of a firm permit, it's just more money. There's not much else that goes along with it.
So I don't want to contradict what you just said because I think it's valid. I just want to make sure here, if we don't do anything to the May meeting, then you have a very
Still
short
have-
window for the renewal period or for the expired grace status, right? And I don't know if based on sunshine rules or whatever, if we can even do anything this meeting. I'll leave that up to y'all, but it's almost like, do we need to go ahead and start this process or just wait? I have no problems. I'm just saying if you do that in May, then you've got a very short window for expired grace to.
I think that's fine. I mean, I'd prefer to give them a little bit of time to do what they need to do. If they don't do it by May and you all feel that we open a complaint, it's very easy to turn around and do that for those that remain.
So are these people responsive or non-responsive? Like, what are you?
In some cases, they're just not responding, which could be maybe we don't have the right contact information, but they've submitted a renewal.
Right.
So they should have been submitting correct contact. Or they have, I don't know. I don't know why they're not providing the information.
Which then begs the question is, do we wait 3 or 4 months to revisit this, or do we go? My big fear would be that they're still operating
Right,
as they are fully licensed and whatnot. And
Now,
maybe
keep in mind, I can tell through our online portal that they are enrolled in the program. So I can tell if they're in the program or not. So in some of these cases, they're in the program. I know they're in the program, but for some reason, they may have a review from, I have one where the review from 2016 hasn't even been accepted yet. So, which means
they've got a problem.
They have a problem. And basically, I've been giving folks the benefit of the doubt if were due really from May forward. I've given them the benefit of the doubt because it does take time to get the documents in and get them accepted. But if they were due maybe May of 19 and before and don't have an acceptance letter yet, then I've been questioning them.
And then my concern would be is in our responsibility to protect the public, if they're still operating and issuing attest function reports, we're now, if we don't do anything till May, then there's a potential they still have.
Now, here's another thing we could do. The several that I have are enrolled, so they are complying by being enrolled.
Right.
So we could renew the permit and open complaints about and look at the fact of why they're not having a peer review within every 3 years like they're supposed to.
Right.
And then address it from the disciplinary side.
I'm going to guess you have a sense for who's making a good faith.
Oh yeah.
And who's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do we have the ability to allow y'all to open a complaint for those that aren't acting in good faith at this point?
I mean,
y'all can open a complaint whenever you want,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, whenever we feel like there's some sort of violation going on. We may be wrong.
Well, but
once
they haven't provided the information we've requested either by that.
Yeah, or if I have a firm who hasn't had a peer review, it's over a year late, and they say they're working on it, but the administrative entity is telling me they don't have it yet. So what's the real answer?
Right. I don't know. I've taken a lot of time here, but I'm more concerned about people continuing on in the same behaviors over the next 3 months when we know they haven't been acting in good faith or being unresponsive, maybe I should say, not in good faith. And maybe we need to get the attention of those folks instead of the ones that are trying to maybe produce whatever it is we've asked them for.
There's part of me that thinks if they're enrolled in the program, maybe we should renew them and then open a complaint to look into the specifics of why they're
don't
so
have it.
delayed on the review.
Yeah.
Why would you have to renew them to get that information? I mean, why would you just not renew them and try to get that information?
Well, we can do that. We can do that.
But I mean,
But I
guess
think
it
what
seems
she's
like
saying
you're,
is
you're
that they
leaning
are
more towards.
I get what you're
renewing
saying, though.
them.
They're properly enrolled. We just don't have evidence of the peer review report.
Right. So there's two different things. You're supposed to be enrolled,
Right.
then you're supposed to have a peer review every 3 years. And you're supposed to show proof of that, right? And so they are enrolled, so they're meeting one aspect of it. But for some reason, based on what I can see, it's been well over 3 years since they've had that review, since it's been accepted. So there's some concern there they're not meeting the every 3-year requirement.
Right, and so I don't know. It would seem like to me in that situation, I mean, because they are delinquent in getting the results of that peer review, that you would not just renew them.
And we can do that. I think part of my fear is we open a complaint and there happened to be good reason why, and then we've held up their ability to practice.
Again, I get that too, but
I don't have a problem with that approach. I just think you need to be pursuing those that are not.
Okay.
So based on that, Wendy, do you have a sense of direction at this point, or have we totally confused everyone?
I think so. I'm going to give I'm not going to go back and do anything. I want the folks to present what they need to present. But the further we get towards the next meeting or the June 30 date, I would like to take some action. And it may be that if they're enrolled, we renew and open a complaint and look into the matter. I don't want to be opening 20 complaints. So I'm hoping some folks are going to do what they need to do.
We kind of sidetracked into that policy change that we had, so apologize for that.
Okay. Well, looking at number 13 and kind of hearing what the committee members have said and the other board members that commented, I would like to read one statement of that on that respondent. It says, per an email received from the respondent on December 20th, 2019, the last test report was issued by respondent was dated October 2019, 2 months after being dropped from peer review. So that is an email from the respondent. I would like to suggest that we change the recommendation from council under the first part to say cease and desist all the test work under the firm until the firm is enrolled in a approved peer review program. Failure to do so will result in additional disciplinary action by the board, and that due to the fact that they have issued a report after not being in the program, that a $750 civil penalty be assessed.
Yeah. And what about the second provision for the due date of August 30th? Do you want to remove that or keep it?
Well, if we're holding the respondent's firm license because he did check the box, correct? So, and that we either need a statement that they're not enrolled in peer review, or if they are enrolled in peer review, that a proof of such enrollment in order to.
I would propose you consider keeping the date, and the reason I say that is because we could run the same cycle again where the person enrolls and provides proof of enrollment and then fails to comply and is dropped 5 months from now. And we're back where we started. So I think that was our reasoning for giving them a required due date for getting that peer review done. We have no reason to believe they didn't perform work during the peer review year. So, and they're not, they are indicating they're continuing to perform a test work. So I think what you're proposing is to add a civil penalty on top of the 2 bullets that are
Right,
here.
that's what I was proposing.
Okay.
and so that date is indicating when that peer review results needs to be submitted.
It's when it needs to be accepted by the peer review committee.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, are we going to reconsider anything on 11 or leave that as is just because of the illness? I was unclear.
Well, I guess since this one is 750 and seemed to be ill, and the other one is 750.
And my
perhaps
opinion was based
ill.
on the minimum of that was fair to both parties.
Yeah.
That we were being fair, especially after the statement that he said that he did. Now, we don't have proof of that, but we have a memo or an email that states he said it. So, any other questions or comments? All right, number 14. Complainant states that respondent claims to be a CPA per his Facebook page. Currently, respondent is still listing himself as a CPA on the personal Facebook page. Respondent has failed to respond to attempts of communication from the department and legal. Legal representation or recommendation is that authorize a formal hearing of authority to settle on the consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for holding out as a CPA with a proper licensure. Any questions or comments on that?
I would think we would want to send a cease and desist letter. I mean, not just a fine. I mean, we need him to stop doing that.
It's part of the order.
Oh, okay.
But only if they sign it.
Only if they sign it, of course, but the language is in the order.
Is this individual a CPA somewhere?
No, this person, from what I have gathered, is a realtor and apparently has this issue with other professions as well, that he holds himself out to be different professions and he is not.
Maybe CPA means something different to him.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, go to number 15. The board received notice from the AICPA that respondent's firm has been terminated from the peer review program due to consecutive non-pass reports in the system reviews. The respondent firm received a rating of fail for the last two peer reports. The respondent issued reports where financial statements of the accountant's compilation report were not in compliance with current guidelines. The respondent states that the reports were not prepared by him. The reports were prepared and signed by another CPA on staff but issued on respondent's letterhead. According to the respondent, he did not review the reports before they were released, stating that the CPA who completed the report had more experience than him with the attest engagement. The respondent did not maintain third-party practice aids at the time of the peer review and was completed to ensure compliance with current standards. It should be noted that the respondent's firm permit was expired status at the time of the complaint was filed with the respondent and since reinstated the firm permit. The respondent states that the CPA staff member who completed the reports with deficiencies is no longer employed by the firm and the firm no longer performs the test work. The respondent filed a peer review exemption form along with the reinstatement application. The recommendation from legal is that authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty of $750 for failure to exercise due professional care and performance professional services and $750 for failure to adequately supervise the performance of professional services by members of his staff. The consent order will also contain the following provisions. The firm should remain current on AICPA standards and utilize third-party practice aids to ensure compliance with those standards and mandatory participation in the 2018-19 CPE audit. Any comments or questions on this one?
This doesn't seem like enough in penalty.
What is what's the next amount that we can go up? Of course, they've been the 750 is so it's a $1,500 total.
He failed the last two peer reviews.
It's no longer in the peer review program.
And does this say he's no longer doing a test work?
No longer doing any test work.
Okay.
It's $1,000 per day per violation is your maximum.
Because he's no longer doing a test work, has he done the exemption form where he says he's not doing a test work now?
Yes, he did.
He did? Okay. Okay.
And I will say the discipline matrix, I mean, it's between a normal violation is 750 to 1,000. And then if you feel like you want to go up more,
So I'll throw it out there. Does anybody feel like we should go from 750 per violation to 1,000?
I'm not on the committee, but I would think that would be more reasonable.
I've got our committee members there. I've got Janet and Todd and Larry. Your thoughts?
I wouldn't be opposed to going up.
I mean, 1,000 certainly would better fit the violation, I think. Yeah.
Pretty serious stuff here, and the fact that they didn't have any quality control, they didn't have any review, they didn't look like they had much of a plan at all, and this is what harming the public that we're really trying to weed out with the peer review.
What is the goal of the CPE audit? To determine, I guess, other than to determine that he has the CPE, but would we be trying to get him to do CPE related to do professional care and supervising?
I guess the thought process behind that is the fact that if he's not doing this particular engagement that was called out in the AICPA hearing was compilation. So, I mean, we could, define some specific CPE on top of it, but a lot of what we've been doing with things that deal with not complying with standards is that we've just been making them a mandatory participant in terms of the CPE audit to ensure they're actually getting their CPE too, because it just begs the question, if you could not do a compilation according to standards, are you up to date with standards in terms of SARS, the SARS with the compilations and reviews? That was the thought process behind it.
I agree with that. I think that this kind of shows that they're not really dotting the I's and crossing T's, and they may not be with their CPE either. So with that, I would suggest that from members of the committee and the board that we come to the consensus that the recommendation be that for $1,000 for each one of the occurrences for civil penalty, and that everything else stay in place. Any questions?
I agree.
Okay. All right. Number 16. The respondent entered into a settlement agreement with the Joint Ethics Enforcement Program, JEEP, for violations of Rules 201, due professional care, and 202, compliance with professional standards, as a result of the substandard audit for a not-for-profit college in the state of South Carolina. The respondent holds a license in the state of South Carolina as well as a firm permit. Respondent does not hold a firm permit in the state of Tennessee, and we are unaware of any test work related or completed by respondent in the state of Tennessee. The respondent is currently in the process of completing the requirements of the settlement agreement, which includes additional focus CPE and pre-issuance reviews. The respondent has met all the CPA requirements stipulated in the agreement. He has not completed all required pre-issuance reviews at this time. Of the 3 pre-issuance reviews that have been completed, one for a not-for-profit college and one for a governmental unit, those 2 have been completed, but the pre-issuance reviews yielded multiple deficiencies in reporting and audit working papers for both entities. It does not appear that the respondent or his firm have taken the corrective actions expected by the committee. So the recommendation from legal is that authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order with the requirement that the respondent's license will be put in a probationary status until such time that the respondent can demonstrate the requirements of settlement under JEEP have been satisfied, and the Ethics Committee has been placed any additional encumbrances on the respondent in the performance of test work or test services. Any comments or questions on that? Trey?
How did we get this? I'm just curious. Where did this come from?
So we receive a quarterly enforcement report
From
from
the-
NASBA, and it aggregates all of the things across the country that have occurred: SEC orders, PCOB orders.
Is this person licensed in Tennessee?
They are licensed, but they aren't located here.
Okay.
So that's why the recommendation is rather late. It's to protect the public here, to look into the matter if they so choose to check on the license status, but doesn't necessarily go any further than that.
Sounds like South Carolina has now been made aware and they can pursue their own investigation, I guess, if they choose.
As part of my review, I spoke with the investigator and ED in South Carolina, so they're now aware of this, and you're correct. They will be reviewing this matter against not only him, but his firm, which is also licensed in South Carolina.
This doesn't necessarily relate to this one, but how is the probationary status different from, well, we were talking about renewing and opening a renew with grace or something about a grace period. Yeah, expired grace, that's what I'm trying to remember.
Expired grace is just your delinquent on your renewal. You're not technically supposed to be practicing if you're on an expired grace status. A probationary status is usually used as a disciplinary matter. It does not restrict the licensee in any manner. They can still practice as normal unless the board has instituted some sort of terms with that probation.
I guess I was wondering about the discussion we were having a few minutes ago. Would probationary status be more appropriate for those that we were thinking of? Well, I guess you're saying they're in expired grace, or we were thinking of renewing and opening a complaint?
Right. So probation is only used in the disciplinary matters. So in order to put those people in probation, you would have to open a complaint and go through the disciplinary process, and then choose to
put them in.
Correct. In expired grace, they do not have rights to practice in expired grace. So if you fail to renew by 12/31 and you move into what we call an expired grace or a delinquent status, you're late on your renewal and you should not be practicing.
So were those 20 in expired grace?
Yes.
Okay, so they shouldn't be practicing.
Correct. They shouldn't be.
Okay. And that would be more.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move forward to number 17. Complaint number 961 was presented to the board in the October meeting. Board requested that the complaint be placed in monitoring status and requested an investigation. The other complaints have not been previously presented to the board. 961 was open when the board became aware of the firm operating a Memphis location without a permit. This came in light just after the firm's owner's license had been revoked. This was noted via the firm's website. The board opened 3 additional complaints for holding out as the licensee on a revoked license. 1 complaint was filed against individual license, and the other 2 were filed against the owner's other 2 firm locations. Respondent has expressed a desire to come into compliance with Tennessee accountancy law and rules. The respondent has also been counseled to cease all use of the CPA designation, the firm name, business cards, advertising to the public until the licensees are reinstated in good standing. Applications for reinstatement of the respondent's revoked individual license firm permit were also received on December 27, 2019. Requesting a review of the reinstatement applications during the May board meeting will be presented to the board at the January meeting. Keep the complaint in monitoring status as a recommendation from council for review at the May board 2020 meeting, along with the reinstatement for applications. Any questions or?
Is this related to the reinstatement? Okay.
All right. Mr. Chairman, we're down to number 18. Would you, since I've got one of my committee members out, would you suggest that we take a break now, or?
I would take that suggestion very kindly, and why don't we take a 10-minute break? It's 2:30. Why don't we reconvene at 2:40 p.m. Central Time? Thanks. Thanks for being on time, relatively speaking, for our short recess. And Andy, we will come back to you. I think I had us up through case number 17, if I'm recalling correctly. So
we're going to start 18 now.
Yeah.
All right. Case 18. Respondent was selected for an audit of CPE in the reporting period set 2017 through 18. A letter of noncompliance was sent to respondent via mail and email explaining the deficiencies of the submission. Respondent had missed the overall 80-hour requirement. He was assessed a total of 19 hours, deficiency of 3 hours, and 16 penalty hours. Respondent was given 90 days to submit the 19 hours to the board. We've not received the owed deficiency or penalty hours, and there has been no response from the respondent. Recommendation from council is to authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle for consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 and submission of 19 CPE hours for failure to maintain CPE and respond to the board. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. Number 19, respondent was selected for an audit of her CPE for the 2017 and 18 period. Letter of noncompliance was sent to the respondent via email explaining the deficiencies in submission. She was assessed a total of 56 hours deficiency, 40 hours, and 16 penalty hours. Respondent was given 90 days to submit the 56 hours to the board. As of January 6, 2020, respondent completed 56 hours of continuing CPE from her audit. Respondent apologized for the delay, noting that it's been a hectic year with the new job and 2 months within 10 months of that time period. Furthermore, respondent indicated that when she received the penalty of hours, she was going into budget season at work, which is the busiest time of the year. The recommendation from council is that we authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty of $500 for failure to maintain CPE. A lower penalty is recommended due to the mitigating circumstances provided by the respondent. Any questions or comments in that area?
I was okay with it until we said that we went with a lower penalty due to the mitigating circumstances. Are we talking about the fact that it was a busy time of year for her? I mean, she had all year. It's not like we asked her to do it.
That's typically not the reason. To me, it was because she has already completed it. She quickly turned around and completed the requirement. As you'll notice, more of the other ones on here still haven't completed the requirement or responded to us. So she just missed the deadline.
Okay, so maybe we should reword that mitigating comment.
If you all are okay with that, I can just strike the last sentence. Yep. I just wanted you all to, because I know like that 19 and 18 were both CPE, and so I just wanted you all to see that $500 difference was because she had complied and was responsive to the board.
You might, this is Todd, in lieu of describing it as mitigation, you could phrase it as cooperation if you want to if the board wants to have a record of justifying the recommended penalty amount and rationale.
Okay. Todd?
They'll strike out mitigating circumstances and put in due to the cooperation provided by the respondent, period. All right.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. Any other comments or questions? All right, let's go to number 20. The respondent self-reported discipline assessed by the Mississippi State Board of Accountancy, where he holds an individual license and firm permit. The Mississippi Board found that the respondent provided false information on the 17, 18, and 19 individual license and firm permit renewals. The respondent was not enrolled and had not completed the peer review during the time period covered by the test reports. Respondent had issued a review report for a Tennessee client for the board for the year ending December 31st, 2015. Respondent did not deny issuing the report referenced above. He also stated the review reports were issued for the same client for years ended December 31st, 2016 and 2017. But there is no evidence that the client submitted those reports to third parties. The respondent has had a notarized peer review exemption from a form on file with the board since November the 4th, 2010. The respondent has continued to affirm peer review exemptions in subsequent year renewals. The respondent confirmed that his firm has not had a peer review to cover engagements completed in the state of Tennessee. The firm has since enrolled in peer review and completed a peer review for the year ended June 30, 2018, as required by the Mississippi Board of Order. The peer review report is dated December 27, 2019, and the rating provided was passed with deficiencies. The respondent appears to be in compliance with the Mississippi order. Recommendation from legal staff is authorized a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $750 for failure to comply with peer review requirements and $750 for providing false information to the state board on renewal applications. Require respondent to complete the NASBA 3-part ethics course and require respondent to participate in CPE audit for reporting period 2019 through 2020. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay.
How many renewals did they tell us false information? Should it be $750 for every false report that was filed with our state?
If you like,
Yeah.
something I looked at, and I'm not sure how you all want to treat this, but I did take into consideration that he was already assessed a $4,000 civil penalty with Mississippi. I mean, take it as you will, however you want to go, but that's something that I looked at whenever I was.
Well, and they only issued one report, or the report starting in 15, right? 15 and 6, or was it? I'm talking about the Tennessee issued report. Yeah. When was that?
Yeah, it was 2015.
So even though
So
they
just
had attested they weren't doing a test work
Okay.
in Tennessee, I guess up to that point.
Okay.
Right.
So if there was only one report, then there was only one application that was deemed incorrect.
Report him.
Can I add something? I was going to say we have a report for the year ended December 31st, 2015, but the respondent also stated that he completed review reports for the same client in 16 and 17. So he actually did 3 for this Tennessee client.
Well, I'm not on this committee, but
Please.
I would consider $750 for every false annual renewal that was made. I don't know.
Or for the 3 reports that were issued.
Which that's basically.
So I guess what your statement is that so $2,250 for failure to comply with peer review requirements, and then $750 for reporting false information because they only reported the false information once. Is that correct?
Or actually did it more than once.
He did.
Were the penalties in Mississippi for these same issues that happened in Tennessee?
Exactly. Obviously different clients. They were Mississippi clients, but he's done this for multiple clients, but only one that we're aware of in the state of Tennessee.
Are you only aware of that because we have this relationship now with the Board of Contractors, and that's about the only public place you can go to find them?
Actually, the first notification I had was a referral from the Mississippi Board,
Okay.
They referred this to me because they were aware of a Tennessee client. Then I inquired with the Board of Contractors. That's how I got a copy of the 1 year report. But they said they did not receive reports for that contractor for the other 2 years. The respondent states that he did them though. So they could have submitted them to a bank or somebody else as far as we know.
Do you know if they paid the Mississippi fines?
Yes, they're in, well, the way they put it is they couldn't tell me whether he was in compliance or not, but they they issue another complaint if they're not, and there's no complaints against the respondent. So it appears that he is in compliance.
So, committee members, I guess we've kind of talked about changing that penalty then from $750 to put the 3 instances to both of them. So it would be a $2,250 civil penalty for both sections. Comments or questions?
I guess I'm okay with leaving it as it is since he paid those fines related to Mississippi. But that's my opinion.
This is Todd. On the second piece of that, the false information to the Tennessee board, to clarify, that only occurred once, right?
No, it would have occurred at least 3 times because he has to renew annually. And if he's stating that he issued a report for 15, 16, and 17, and correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but he has claimed exemption since like about 2010. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, this is Kevin. I could see maybe a fine of $750 per year for the false reporting, but I'm not sure that we've historically kind of double or triple decked the peer review fine. In other words, so maybe one option might be to keep the $750 fine for failing to comply with peer review, and then if we want to make the other fine for false reporting on a per incident basis, deal with that accordingly.
For what it's worth, that's consistent with the logic that Mississippi used. Just not that that binds us or anything, but that was their application too. Is they hit him 3 times with false information and once for the peer review violation.
That would seem. I would support that.
I could support that.
Okay, seeing consensus, we'll go with that recommendation. Number 21, a complaint was filed with a former client against the respondent alleging failure to exercise due professional care and negligence in performance of tax services. The respondent was engaged to complete a Form 990 for a nonprofit organization. Despite providing the necessary information to complete the return, the respondent did not file the return in a timely manner. An investigation was completed. There was evidence supporting the tax engagement with the respondent. There is correspondence from the respondent stating that the return had been filed timely, but he never provided proof of the filing to the complainant. It was discovered that the respondent did file the return with the IRS, but only after the first notice of failure to file was received from the IRS and forwarded the respondent in April of 2019. The return was accepted at the IRS on May the 10th, 2019, as resulting in late filing. The complainant was charged a late filing penalty of $2,489.50. A request for abatement of the penalty was made with the IRS. However, this request was denied. It appears that the email instructions from the respondent stated there is nothing to mail in as I will e-file your return. It appears the respondent neglected to actually e-file the return until May the 10th of 2019, resulting in a late penalty. The respondent has not offered to provide any concessions to the complainant and has provided no response to the complainant explaining the late filing of the return. The respondent has agreed that the return was filed late and that it was his oversight. The recommendation from council is authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty of $750 for failure to exercise due professional care and the performance of tax services. Require respondent to complete 8 hours of CPE on Circular 230 requirements, and require respondent to participate in CPE audit for a reporting period 2018-19. And I guess my first question on there is there's nothing we can do to make him pay that penalty, or that's a civil matter and he can take that up in civil court, or it seems illogical if you said you were going to file it and you didn't file it, that if there's an issue there that...
Was the return on extension?
The return wasn't on extension. It was engaged in information provided in August. The client received notification that the return was complete, signed the 8879 in October in order to meet the deadline, thought they were okay until they got the IRS notice that said that the return hadn't been filed. Contacted the client. He said it had been filed. He would send some proof of filing. Never did. The only way they found out that the return was filed in May of 2019 is they engaged another CPA who asked for an IRS transcript.
And to your question, I think, traditionally the board is not, really that's almost a fee dispute as between the practitioner and the client, and so we typically would not intervene in that.
Say for what it's worth, the complainant is aware of the fact that, quite aware of the fact that they can take legal action. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Talk about any questions or comments on the recommendation from legal counsel?
Was there an engagement letter by chance? Did you ask?
There was no engagement letter, but the complainant was able to forward some email correspondence that proved engagement. Plus, there was an invoice, and they provided proof of payment as well. So all of that, indicates that there was an engagement in place. And as I said, he actually forwarded a copy of the return along with the 8879 with his signature, but he never filed it.
All right. Any further questions or comments? All right. Number 22, a complaint was filed by a former client alleging failure to exercise due professional care in the performance of audit services. The client states that the respondent failed to fulfill his contractual duties in providing an audit report acceptable to the Controller's Office for the fiscal years ending 2016, 17, and 18. Previous complaint regarding this matter was during the 2019 meeting when notification was received by the board and that the respondent could no longer contract for audits of the Controller's Office due to significant deficiencies noted in review of a contracted audit. The board issued a civil penalty and placed both the firm permit and the owner of the firm's individual license on probation status. The respondent states that he was unable to comply with the reporting requirements of the Controller's Office because he was unable to obtain the required pension information for each individual school from the client or the state. The board has previously assessed disciplinary actions, and this is a recommendation from counsel that we've already previously assessed that disciplinary action. It's recommended to close the complaint and send a separate letter to the complainant notifying that disciplinary action was assessed based on the complainant's information. Any questions or comments there?
Sure, I understand the recommendation.
So the board already decided and assessed discipline to this respondent based on the exact same set of facts. And now the organization that was a party to this, they filed a complaint kind of saying the same thing. We can't reassess discipline on the same set of facts. And so we're just going to notify the complainant that this matter has been handled and that, that we're not ignoring or closing, but that it's already been heard by the board.
Tell them who the complainants were.
Jerry, did you look at this one?
Yes, I did.
Were these TCRS plans?
Yes.
And that's all on the website?
Yes.
All pertinent information?
Oh, yes. And just to clarify, the first complainant that the board assessed discipline under, it was a comptroller's office, and now it's the actual client coming forward. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that confusion.
Okay, so maybe we should clarify that in here. Is that
okay?
because yeah, Trey's right. If it's TCRS plans, I mean, it's not something you get from the client, but it's something it's readily available on the internet. But yeah, maybe clarify that. You're basically saying we can't punish them twice for the same thing. Okay.
So what language would you all recommend for the report?
In the recommendation section, we could say something to the effect that the board has previously assessed disciplinary action based on a complaint from the particular office that lodged the complaint that we acted on.
Yeah, the comptroller's office.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
Because of our previous assessment of penalty based on the comptroller's office complaint.
And that, with that complaint, he did sign it and pay the $1,000 civil penalty. Should we say that in there too, for which was,
Well, it says we've previously assessed disciplinary action.
I think he got the consent order.
And that.
all right. Any other comments or questions on that one? Then we have gone through our proposed discipline from number 8 through number 22 before we get to the re-representations. And I guess I would like to entertain a motion to the board from our committee to be approved tomorrow with 8 through 22, except for number 13. And number 13 it would have a $750 civil penalty assessed with it on top of the recommendation from council. Number 15, that the civil penalties be raised to $1,000 each on those two. And then on number 20, that the second civil penalty in the number 20 matter be increased threefold to $2,250 for reporting false information to Tennessee State Board for renewal applications. And then on number 22, that the board, that we add in there that based on the complaint from the controller's office to the end of the first sentence.
I would add to that motion that number 19, we were going to reword the recommendation about the mitigating circumstances. I don't know if we agreed to take that last sentence out or to change it. I'm okay either way.
I think we're going to change.
We were going to change, take out mitigating circumstances to cooperation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other things that we have in there? Good catch, Larry.
Oh, I would make that motion with that one change I just now said.
Okay. And all the other changes too.
Yeah.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, we'll have to have a call vote on that.
I would like to add real quick for number 22. I did confirm that he had signed the consent order and paid the $1,000 civil penalty.
Okay.
So
Okay.
good to go on that.
We can go ahead and call the roll on the committee.
Kathy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Larry Elmore, Todd Skelton,
Aye.
Down number 23 through number 26 are representations that are being presented with the updates. And so we'll start with number 23, and then we've all had a chance to read that, so I'll read the update. The complaint was previously separated from the complaint against the individual CPA majority owner. The complaint should have been included in the complaint against the individual CPA owner as disciplinary action was assessed against the individual CPA owner. The respondent's firm permit has expired and the firm no longer exists. The non-CPA owner of the respondent is in bad health and battling an illness. would be a tremendous burden for the non-CPA owner to provide a test work performed by the respondent, if any. The individual CPA owner was penalized for violations of peer review requirements, paid the civil penalty, and in the process of re-enrollment into the peer review program. The recommendation from council is to close. Does council have anything to add to that, or?
No, just the two complaints. It should have been one complaint, and somehow it was separated. So this one just needs to be closed.
Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. Number 24. We've got the complaint in front of us. It was a hack of a individual's system, and specifically an email where wire transfers were made on behalf of the complainant, which they were not really had been made. The FBI has been involved and has been actively investigating. The respondent firm has hired an independent expert to investigate how the complainant's electronic information has been investigated by whom, and will provide an update upon completion. The recommendation here is last time was to put in litigation monitoring status. The update is that the parties have settled this matter and each party holds the other harmless. No party admits nor denies any violations occurred. And the recommendation from council here is that we close it. Any questions or comments with that? All right. Number 25 deals with a random selected CPE audit. The update is that the respondent has submitted hours obtained during the 2016-17 plus 8-hour penalty for failure to meet the 80-hour requirement. Respondent has gone through a divorce, moved, and was not able to get all of her mail. Respondent has updated her contact information with the board. The new recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of civil penalty of the amount of $500 for failure to keep contact information up to date and for failure to respond to the board. Remove the 120-hour CPE requirement due to respondent's submittal of hours required. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay, seeing none. Number 26.
That 500 is an addition to the 1,000 that they previously paid. Is that right?
No, it's a reduction from
That
1,000.
is a reduction from 1,000 to 500. Okay. That was contact information. The other one was CPE, or is that? Am I reading this differently? It's fine. If you're telling me it's going from 1,000 to 500, that's all I want to know.
I think the way I read it there is that the 1,000 was fair to complete it, but then we've since obtained that they actually did complete the hours, plus an 8-hour penalty for failure to meet the 80-hour requirement, and then so that has been established. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It just kind of reads like we're doing this.
Did they actually complete the hours before? I mean,
Well, they never received the information or the audit request, and when we finally contacted this person, we did find that they had completed the CPE, but they just never responded to us because they never received a request. And so when we finally got in touch with them, they complied, did everything we asked, and
$500 penalties related to the failure to keep their address up to date with the board.
right, for not contacting and keeping up the information.
Any other questions or comments related to that one?
Is that a common penalty, 500 for failure to do addresses? I don't see that one very often. So, in matrix, or how does that?
It's on the matrix.
It's on the matrix. Okay.
Didn't we have one earlier today in another?
Yeah, and so I think in this one there were mitigating factors that she went through a divorce, and we're not really sure all of the facts that kind of surround it, but that maybe she was prevented from getting her mail or something to that extent, and so it was lowered for that reason.
I didn't know, like, in the situation, like, when you said that stuff, I didn't know if a mitigating sort of be a letter of warning or something like that. I just didn't know her situation, but.
Sorry.
That's why I was asking about the major. I just didn't know if that's a standard.
I believe the standard is 750, but we mitigated it to 500.
So, Trey, were you kind of going where you might want to
I didn't
move for a letter
understand,
of
or I
warning?
don't know her particular situation.
Okay.
I didn't know if 500 would be burdensome. If she did, in fact, complete the hours and had them done, I guess my only thought process was moving back towards if she was prevented from getting her mail or any of that, would a letter of warning be more appropriate? Like, hey, this is the rule. You need to notify us timely. But I don't know the circumstances, so I'm only asking the question just to say it's 500 kind of. Y'all know her situation better than we do. That's all I'm saying.
She still could have overridden that in the fact that she had moved out and that she had 30 days to report to the board that she had changed her address. And so that's the reason I kind of felt like it was fair. I was just waiting for a response to see what they thought. But from my seat, I think it does kind of ring that, hey, we tell you have to give us notice when your address changes. And if somebody else is holding your mail, well, why didn't you change your address like you're required to?
Right. I know divorce does crazy things to people.
It does.
So I was just questioning. Didn't know her particular situation.
Number 10 had a similar penalty.
Okay. But it didn't have the same factors, right?
No, not the same. Yeah.
That's fine. I guess she could push back if she wanted to. I just don't know her situation, and if she was prevented from getting mail, I get that the rule is the rule, but.
So actually, for this, the change in address, we gave 500 is the normal, and then letter of warning would be mitigating. So if you'd like to do a letter of warning, that's something you all could consider.
I don't know what would mitigate notifying the board. I agree with your statement, but if y'all talk to her and you understand her situation and you're comfortable with 500, I would say stick with the 500. But
I'm comfortable with it.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Number 26 is the complaint was executive director of a nonprofit organization, and the respondent was the director of finance. There seemed to be some unauthorized payments and some other issues that occurred. There was signatures on unauthorized checks appeared to be forged. The matter was turned over to the Secret Service, and in addition to criminal allegations, complainant noted that respondent had been terminated prior to the discovery of the alleged theft and fraud for poor performance. When it originally came in, we placed the matter in litigation monitoring pending the U.S. Secret Service. Now it's coming back before us, and the new information is respondent's license expired at 12/31/16, and he's never attempted to reinstate it. An update and investigation with the Secret Service is expected on Tuesday, January 25th or 21st, 2020. And the question is, did we receive that update?
Actually, we did not. This was presented to you all before the meeting, and then at the time of the meeting, there was.
She called me. Well, she emailed me. She's on protection duty, so it'll be like the first week of February. But it doesn't sound like they've done anything much on their end. And
they've had this for a year and a half, and it's still pending.
It says close and flag. Does that mean continue to monitor?
That means that if he comes back to reinstate, they'll have a flag on there. and we can question.
Does that mean we do not have to give him the license if he submits a reinstatement application?
If he submits a reinstatement an application, then he would be qualified to reinstate.
Even though this is going on.
Is there anything we can do?
The flag would, I mean, have we had this happen before where we told him to come before the board?
No, this is my issue or my concern with close and flag. I mean, I'm with you on this one, meaning that they're just taking forever and we don't have anything else to go on. But when you close and flag, if someone comes back to reinstate the license and they complete the CPE and submit the application, do we have to give the license back if there's this flag? And then we reopen the complaint? Is that what we do at that time? Or do we hold the reinstatement and go through the complaint process before we agree to reinstate?
You need to go through the complaint process. I don't have the information. What about probationary, like we talked about earlier? If this is ongoing, is that a possibility or not?
I think we've been unable to find this person. Is that correct?
That's correct. They've been unable to locate
And
the
we haven't
individual.
either.
I would recommend, if it's possible, and legal, you can tell us this, if we require prior to any reinstatement that he appear before this board.
I believe we can do that.
Okay.
And also we would request the U.S. Secret Service to keep us informed. If they do issue some type of action, then we can open up a complaint based on that action.
But haven't we also talked, Wendy, about the issue of we don't want people to avoid punishment by just letting their license expire after they do something. And so that's what's going to happen here. He does something, he or she does something bad, let their license expire, and then they avoid all punishment, period. And so,
Can we put something in the data, because the national database now that kind of gives them a black mark or red mark?
Well, hang on, wait, because there's an ongoing criminal investigation.
Yes.
Right. And if the license lapses, they don't renew it. If they come back for renewal, then part of that would be, have you been convicted of a crime or any of that stuff, right? Does any of that come into play?
Yeah, I mean, if he was only convicted of a felony, that's the question that's asked.
If he pleads down to a lesser charge,
Then it wouldn't have to disclose that.
okay.
So as I understand it, the current status is that he's in litigation monitoring. That's what the board previously, how they disposed of this case. If he were left to remain in litigation monitoring as opposed to close and flag, what is the difference there? Would that give us more flexibility if he decided to reinstate?
Yes, it will keep the complaint open, and we don't know how long it's going to be. We've had this for 3 years, 2.5, and
It's 18, so yeah, maybe.
and the Secret Service has been sitting on it for 1.5 years. I mean, at this point, we don't know if the charges are true. If this was to be closed, we would still have the connection with the Secret Service, and if they decided to do any kind of disciplinary action, we could open up another complaint. It would be more fresh with information.
So one thing that I just noticed that, and maybe y'all have this information, but it's not in here. This seems to imply that the license expired before these infractions occurred. Is that true or not? This says the license expired in 16, and then he was terminated in 18, but it's not clear when the infractions occurred.
I can't remember the exact dates, but I do know that at the point that he was employed, by the employer. I remember this, that she made the comment that the license was active and then it expired during the employment period, which was a fairly short period. So I would have to go back into looking at dates to see exactly when it expired versus when they're allocating, because this happened for a period of time.
Yeah, to me, that would make a difference if the license expired and then they did this stuff.
My suspicion, and again, I'd have to go back into it, and I can see how lucky I am with this. It keeps knocking me out. But
at that point, wouldn't they have to answer the question on the application that says, "Have you ever
Convicted of a felony, isn't it? So if this doesn't,
depending on how this turns out,
if it's not a felony, then they could answer.
He hasn't been convicted.
I mean, I would almost lean toward leaving it in monitoring. I don't know how the rest of the committee.
Well, you were saying something about it being fresh if we reopened. So, what is your thinking about emphasis?
This case is almost 3 years old. There's nothing been moving on it. We've been waiting for the police department. We've been waiting for the Secret Service. And I think that if the Secret Service is still pending, they are doing something. We have contact with the investigator. I think that if we close this one, we will stay in contact with the Secret Service and make sure that we don't miss anything.
So, but how does that happen? Is that
what do you track?
The concern of the board is that it's close it and then it goes away. He files for reinstatement. He gets a license.
You know,
That's
we've had
the
turnover in legal staff here, so I'm not being sarcastic, but I'm saying we have had several attorneys in my tenure on the board. So as time goes on, without it being on a quote list,
that's not a threat either.
No, I hope you'll stay, but any of this stuff is no. I know I'm joking. I'm just saying. My point is, if it's not on a list, then what is the mechanism we use to ensure that the next person knows that it's still there?
Well, and that's the closing flag. It stays out there, so if he does try to reapply, it will flag it. So we would be notified.
So what if he doesn't reapply and he gets convicted of a felony? Then nobody here, how are we going to, unless they reapply, we would never have any kind of function on our board's part. Right?
I would keep it on Sherry's list.
Seems like Mr. Elmore's correct. I would just leave it on.
Just leave it on there.
So I guess reading the tea leaves here that we're going to go ahead and just continue on with
litigation
monitoring.
Is there any reason why? I mean, does it affect some kind of ratios or something? Is that the reason for needing to close it instead of continuing to monitor? Or?
Well, we've been looking at cases that are 3 years or more and seeing if there's something actually moving on the case, then we would keep it in a status. But on this case, nothing is moving. It's just sitting out there. And so we've been trying to look at these kind of cases to see what we can do. And if it's just going to sit out there, it may be out there for another 5 or 6 years.
I would say if the Secret Service is continuing to even talk with y'all about it, something's happening.
I can say she did state that they had forensic analysis that would support the claims of the company, which was the complainant. And Larry, the answer to your question is it does appear that some fraudulent transactions happened both before and after expiration from the report.
I guess I don't see an issue with leaving a complaint out there until it's fully resolved. I mean, the rationale to me just to get it off the list, to me, doesn't seem like a good rationale.
We had one less than a year ago where several of us asked, well, why was that one left remaining open all that time? But that one was a little different. In this case, I think if we can show that it's been discussed today. And,
Yeah, that we're
the,
following up.
and the board actually directed legal to leave it, that we prefer that it be left open. I think if you show a pattern of bringing it up every once in a
Right.
while and us saying keep it open, I just feel like we're better off leaving it open.
I think it's better to keep the history of what's gone on and follow up and come to an agreement about how we want to proceed. And if just leaving it open in litigation monitoring, then until it's fully resolved, I mean, that seems appropriate to me.
And I will say that I keep documentation. I make a conscious effort every couple weeks before the board meeting to follow up quarterly with the Secret Service agent to see where they are. So we do have documentation that we're keeping a line of sight.
Yeah, and I think that's why we want to leave it open.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
If something were to happen to you or somebody else, who would know
Right.
to go do that?
Yeah.
All right, so the recommendation from the committee is to leave this matter into litigation monitoring pending the U.S. Secret Service investigation in order to avoid interference. So just keep monitoring. All right. Then that gets us to the conclusion of our re-representations, which was 23 through 26. So I will entertain a motion to recommend to the board for tomorrow's approval that 23 through 25 be approved, and also 26 with the change of placing it into litigation monitoring pending the U.S. Secret Service investigation in order to avoid interference. That's a motion. Okay. Have a motion. Second. All right. Call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
All right, great. I do have on the report here, the legal report there. Larry had a question to come back under number 7 so as to avoid anything tomorrow on the consent agenda. We've already approved that, but he had a question on that.
Yeah, I'm not asking us to reevaluate our decision or our motion or vote, but just curiosity. Number 7, this is the one where it says the respondent denied issuing the report. It was believed the report was fraudulent. The owner of the business who the report was on denied hiring the firm. So how did this report ever get created? I mean, where did it come from?
Originally came from the Mississippi State Board because the financial statement was part of basically what happened is this client filed a application with the Mississippi Board of Contractors. They obviously did their due diligence like our Tennessee board does, forwarded it to the Mississippi board. It was outside of their jurisdiction, so they forwarded it to me. Is how we got it.
I'm not asking how did we get the information. I'm saying if both sides deny hiring the firm and the firm denying doing it, well, who created the report?
Well, no, basically what happened is
Not our report.
The CPA is saying, I've never had an engagement with this client. We contacted the client because since there was the Board of Contractors involved, I went to our auditor with the Board of Contractors, said, can you give me contact information for the owner of this business? So I contacted the owner of the business, and what he said is, no, we never did contract this firm. It was supposed to be a placeholder in our application with the Mississippi Board, and he basically said we just made it up as a placeholder. Now, take that for whatever.
So the client who had submitted the application with the
he denied that there was he also, it was both the CPA and the client denied an engagement.
Well, what is talking about a report signer?
What's this again? I'm sorry.
This is in number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Says the respondent states that the report signer had been an employee with the firm so there was a report then, right?
There was a report issued with the contractor's application, but the owner of the firm said, we just went online and found a CPA firm, and that individual's name was on the company's website. And
so the company filing for the Mississippi Board license basically admitted we put that review report in there, and it was
And we never, and that CPA did not issue that report. When I asked, why did you do that? And he said, well, it was a placeholder. We had intended to substitute it with a legitimate report.
Okay.
I hope the
Does that
contractors
answer
board
it? I
heard
know
that.
That doesn't make sense.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, that really doesn't make sense.
The only person that we're responsible for here is the CPA, so the fact that the owner did that has nothing to do with our
Exactly.
authority.
That would be the Mississippi Board of Contractors if they want to do something in terms of that.
Okay. There's probably no way to clarify that any better than what it already is in here.
It's one of the more crazy ones I've seen. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He should have just said the dog did his homework and just leave it at that.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've got one more item here on the enforcement side, and it's a request to lift probation from Baird and it's Baird and Associates, and also Kevin Graham. I think everybody got a copy of the order for which they signed, and down in the body of this, the order was respondents Tennessee CPA license and firm permit are hereby voluntarily placed on probation until respondents produce to the board a letter of completion of the National Peer Review Committee for respondents' firm's March 31, 2006 review. Upon receipt of the completion of the letter, this matter must be brought before the board for reinstatement at its next regularly scheduled meeting. On the back page of this, you have a letter from the ICPA dated October 29, 2019. That says that on October 23rd, 2019, the National Peer Review Committee determined that your most recent peer review is complete, and the next date of your next peer review is January 31, 2020. Would legal like to add anything to that? I guess that's going to be brought tomorrow.
You can make a recommendation.
Okay. I would like to make a recommendation that we approve that the probation be dropped due to the meeting the requirements of the agreement of the consent order.
That's one really quick question.
Yes, sir. Please.
Was our desire, and I don't remember this case necessarily, but was our desire that they only have it complete, not necessarily passed? Because the only thing that says is that it's complete. It doesn't say good, bad, or...
The letter actually states it's complete.
Right. But was that all we cared about? That it be complete?
That's all the consent agenda required.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that
consent order.
That was the intent because the review had already happened at the time. So it couldn't have been another way of looking at it because the peer review the actual review itself had already been complete. Or the report had been issued, meaning there had been a results issued. It's just that they were in the process of completing corrective actions.
So do we know if the review was passed with deficiencies or just passed, or all the corrective actions were completed?
That's what complete means, is that they've satisfied the committee.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't get that same wording you used to get.
Oh, okay. So they did pass the peer review then?
Well, if there were corrective actions, probably not, because you only get corrective actions when you don't pass a peer review. But that was not the focus of the consent order.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that was my question. We only cared that it was complete.
Right.
All right. So a motion's been made. A question's been asked. Do I have a second on the motion to accept?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And I'll request a call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that completes all the agenda items from the Enforcement Committee.
Thank you. And y'all had a heavy lift on this quarter, so appreciate all the diligent review on the committee members' part and also all the questions and review on the part of those who are not on the committee in anticipation of the decisions we'll have to make tomorrow on these cases. We will next proceed to the Laws and Rules Committee, and I'll turn that over to Chair Janet Booker Davis.
Okay. I think you all received the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy policy statements. And I guess over the past, I don't know how long it's been, but we've had rule changes that have made some of our policies perhaps in conflict with the rules. So what this document is wanting to do is to try to clarify the policy statements that the staff uses to operate. And so it ended up with 3 policy statements that they're wanting to continue with. And then there are, I think, a couple of other items that maybe we might want to discuss. So Wendy and I went over this and thought it would be good to just kind of walk through this and just highlight a few comments and entertain any questions that anybody else might have. So, Wendy. Would you like to walk through this?
My intent here is not to skip over something if you don't understand it, but I'm going to try to go quickly.
Yeah.
Just say, hey, if you want me to further explain.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I just would like to say before we start, there's been some recent talk when we go up to the Government Operations Committee that's important for everyone to know the difference between a rule and a policy. And so policies they can expand on or explain further a rule, but they can't add to it. And policies cannot affect the rights of licensees or any of the citizens of Tennessee. So with that being said, I think it was really great of Wendy to bring that up and say, let's clean these up because they are in rules. Anyway, so I just wanted you to have that lens when you're looking at these, that, policies are supposed to be kind of narrow and about the workings of the day-to-day and that kind of thing. So anyway, continue.
Okay, so number 1 under CPA exam applicants that have been convicted of a felony may submit additional information to the board or its designee for review and determination of eligibility subject to the Fresh Start Act prior to sitting for the exam. So right now the Fresh Start Act refers to the issuance of a license, and that it guides how we deal with good moral character. And just because you are convicted of a felony doesn't mean we deny your license like we may have done in the past. And now we are guided by the Fresh Start Act, and that felony conviction needs to have something to do with the profession of accountancy itself. What this policy is saying is basically that they may submit information about their conviction prior to sitting for the exam and have the board consider that, so that they don't go through the process of sitting for the exam if they know the board's going to deny the license based on the felony conviction. So it doesn't say they have to, but it says they can if they would like, I believe. Would you agree? So that's number 1. Number 2, exam candidates that have been called for military service shall receive an automatic extension on the CPA examination credits for the length of time that the individual is out of the country. That's already in rules, so this is just a duplication, and we do that in practice. So we're recommending that be deleted. Number 2, under CPE, during each renewal period, 10% of active licensees will be selected for a full CPE audit. Furthermore, staff shall have the authority to request additional information and documentation from any licensee for cause. Failure to provide the requested documentation shall result in disallowance of associated CPE hours. We are recommending that we keep this policy, and basically there is a rule that indicates that we can audit any licensee at any time for any reason, and this just focuses what the board has previously determined to be an acceptable amount of people to audit.
I would like to suggest that we consider saying a minimum of 10%, because with the way technology is going, I think it's going to be very easy to automate checking CPE. And I don't want us to just check 10% if we can check 90% or 100% with little or no additional effort. So I think if we put a minimum of 10%, we can do 10%. And then if we want to do more because it's efficient and effective, and then we can if we have that minimum in there. That's just my thought.
And Wendy, I think that's kind of what we talked about with the implementation of getting a list of the CPE that licensees have completed. It's kind of getting to that same issue. If you say a minimum, I guess. What do you think?
Well, we already have the option to do more than 10%. We could audit everybody if we wanted to. The rule allows us to audit anybody at any time. I think we're farther off than you think about being able to handle more than we already handle. The audit service is nice, but it doesn't really reduce the workload very much, if at all. It brings all the information to one place, but it doesn't really reduce the work. But
Well, it's going to be interesting because if people are having to put down their classes, you may end up with a pool of people that are like, well, I didn't get there. So you're this whole group of people, and then the question becomes, do you look at the stuff that they actually did get? Because you're going to have, I assume we're going to have the stats say, okay, these people reported 30 hours and they should have had 40 or 80 or whatever. And so then you go through that process. You can take all those people out of the population and say, you got to go finish up what you're doing, right? Or you got to get the penalty hours or whatever because they didn't have it timely. Then you're going to go select 10% from the remaining population, or what are you doing?
well, Trey, at renewal, it's feasibly impossible for us to check all of them.
But I'm saying if somebody puts down on their application for renewal, I mean, if they're having to submit the number of classes, I presume there's going to be a check where we know.
Right. So they do have to answer how many hours they got. So if they indicate they got 80 hours.
They're also having to submit the number of classes now, which may
Right.
increase the number of people that are not compliant.
Right. So if the system checks that are in there don't meet the requirements, then it comes to a staff member and we don't renew them.
Right.
So there are many sitting out there.
So you're going to have a pool of those people.
We have a pool of those people that haven't been renewed yet. When they can attest they've done everything, they will be renewed.
So are you pulling then from the people who claim to be compliant when they renew? I'm asking because I don't know.
We'd be pulling the audit middle to end of April. So whoever had renewed by that point
You'd be pulling from the renewed group.
We'd be pulling from a renewed group, correct?
Yeah. So maybe more than 2% or 10% of the renewals. I'm saying that boosts your population a little bit because if you take 10% of the remaining population, that's maybe greater than 10% of the actual total population, if that makes sense.
I kind of get what Judy was saying is as technology progresses, so not this year, not next year, maybe the next, as the Tennessee Society of CPAs reports the information to the CPA or CPE website from NASPA, and then as the AICPA does or other third-party reporters start reporting that online, I'm sure the software is going to be able to, it would be my opinion that the software would be able to tell you if the person had 40 hours and it was reported from third parties, which I think then that the AI feature of the software would indicate that, okay, they have been audited via the third parties that have reported. And so we may actually be able to do more as a percentage than 10% because we can rely on the software to tell us that these third-party providers have reported it. The software has verified that they've reported it and they've uploaded the requirements accordingly. Thus, we could include that in our percentage in total. That way we can be above the minimum 10% by using this new software to indicate that. Now, it's not here now, and it may not be here in 3 years, but I think reading through what Judy said was maybe we might want to consider that so that when that point does come, we can say it's a minimum because it could definitely be over.
Right.
I think she's saying she's not. I think she's saying we have a rule that says we have the right to review anybody's CPE. So therefore, we could do 50, we could do 100. This rule does not limit us to 10%.
Right, but it indicates that you're going to get a sample of about 10%. That's
And,
what,
and that's
and if you
that's
just put
for
a
that's
minimum,
for
I
a
don't.
full CPE audit as well. And then the next sentence does say that they can request additional information. And I think one of the things we talked about was maybe, did we talk about deleting that for cause
Yeah, we talked about deleting for
as a way to
cause.
kind of get to, if you wanted to do some sampling, you know, when technology allows.
I'm fine if we want to add
A minimum.
a
I don't think it
minimum.
hurts. I mean,
No. Because it still allows you to do the 10% for the full audit, and then if you eliminate the for cause, you can do sampling.
Does our rule allow us to do less than 10%?
The rule does not prescribe for that. That's the point of the policy. So
Right.
the rule says you can audit anybody at any time. And so this is just,
But it wouldn't say that we had to do 10% period.
I mean, we could do none according to
Yeah,
the rule.
yeah. That's what I was getting at.
The policy is just to kind of
Direct
indicate
staff.
how the staff is going to implement the rule.
And we do announce that policy both in the meetings, at presentations that you do, Wendy's, so that practitioners know that they are subject to audit.
Yes.
So when we announce that, if it's over 10%, then
Yeah, that could be fine too. Yeah.
definitely.
I just remember seeing how many, the results of our 10%, how many people did not comply. And as long as I'm on the board, I think if automation provides us with a way to audit more than 10%, I'm all for that. I mean, I think that protects the public more than. That's one of those things we can definitely do. Yeah. I just want to see people doing the right thing, complying with
Right.
what they're supposed to do. I mean,
Okay, so we would add, during each renewal period, a minimum of 10% of active licensees will be selected for a full CPE audit. Furthermore, staff shall have the authority to request additional information and documentation from any licensee, and then strike for cause. For failure to provide the requested information shall result in disallowance of associated hours.
For tomorrow, are you all going to want another updated red line or just a completed document? Just so I can know what to have prepared.
What normally don't we get another updated red line with that put in, so it's for record?
Okay, yeah, we can do it. I mean, this is a short enough document. I don't see a problem. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, for number 2 of the CPE section, the executive director and CPE coordinator shall have the authority to approve courses that are not registered with NASBA. This entire section has been incorporated into rule. So we do not need that anymore. Number 3, it is the responsibility of the CPA to determine if a course is a technical subject when the field of study is classified as specialized knowledge. Y'all may remember that we recently updated the rules and talking about technical CPE. Previously, specialized knowledge was in the non-technical field, but we allowed people to submit an attestation they believe it should be considered technical through this policy, but it has been moved to a technical subject in rule, so we do not need this policy any longer. Number 4, CPAs who are licensed in and residents of another state will be compliant if they meet the state's ethics CPE requirements, provided that the state has at least 2 hours of state-specific ethics. CPAs who are licensed in and residents of another state without an ethics CPE requirement shall comply with the requirements of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. So this is already defined in rule, and actually this number 4 here is more stringent than the rule. So if you all like this, we would have to get a rule change. And specifically, the rule requires that if the other state has an ethics requirement, that is okay. It doesn't specify that the other state has to have a state-specific requirement. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I think since we're one of the few states that has a state-specific requirement, I like the rule that you just described because the majority of those other states probably have an ethics requirement, but not a state-specific one.
Right. So if you're with Kevin, then we're good. We strike this and we move on. If you like the policy, then we would need a rule change.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with.
Okay. Under the next section, registered firms. Number 1, a CPA firm can only use terms indicating multiple personnel in the name of the firm if the firm employs at least 2 CPAs. Contract and seasonal employees do not fulfill the requirement. So when we did a firm name rule change about 2 years ago, and we incorporated this into the rule. The specific part that's not in there is that contract and seasonal employees do not fulfill the requirement. So that's not part of the rule.
So they would interpret it as they could count those people. What do we need to do? It sounds like we need to make a rule change, which is.
I suppose that if you want to get that detailed, then yes, you would need a rule change. So right now, if someone called me and says, can I use and company? I have some contract employees over tax season. I would have to say yes, because either that or they can use the and associates during tax season and not the rest of the year.
Right. It doesn't help to put it in this, does it?
Oh, we can't. Yeah, I don't think we can let
so it's just a rule change.
The policy cannot stand the way it is. If you want that specificity, I can't say the word, in the rule, then we would need a rule change. So how does the group feel about that?
I think we need to consider maybe not a rule change just for this one thing, but put it on a list for when we have rule changes and incorporate it, because I do think it's very misleading for them to have one CPA that's full-time and say and associates or and company when someone off the street walks in there and they see 15 people and it's not tax season and they think that there's that many CPAs there as opposed to one CPA, if that makes any sense.
I understand the board's concern. I will say with the way rulemaking has been going lately, I don't know if I would advise that, but it's just something to consider. And I think moving forward, these types of rule changes are going to be rulemaking hearings rather than like proposed rules where, you don't have to have the public comment and that kind of thing. So just something to consider.
This type of rule change would be considered more restrictive, and so that's where she's leading.
Yeah, sorry.
I will keep it on a list. I have a list of other minor things that I have not moved forward with because they're not necessary without something else. Under the number 2, fictitious firm names shall be reviewed by the executive director and the firm coordinator. Names that comply with the items on the fictitious firm name checklist will be approved. Both the executive director and the firm coordinator must acknowledge their approval by signing the checklist. Any firm names on which both parties do not agree shall be forwarded to the board for approval. So we updated the firm name rules just about 2 years ago, and it makes it much easier now to evaluate a firm name. And if Karen and I don't agree, then we would bring it to the board. So if it doesn't meet the rule, it comes before the board. Or if we don't think it meets the rule or it's on the fence about meeting the rule, then we would bring it to you. So we didn't feel that this policy was necessary any longer. Under number 4, enforcement, the executive director or designee has the authority to issue a cease and desist order to unlicensed firms who advertise as an accountant or perform accounting services. There's standard operating procedure within the department that we do not send cease and desist letters, so this isn't something we could do even if we wanted to. Number 2, applicants for an initial license or reinstatement of a lapsed license who disclose disciplinary actions or felony convictions must submit formal documentation regarding the actions. This information shall be presented to the board at its next meeting to determine if the individual should be approved for an initial license or license reinstatement. So this is all guided by the Fresh Start Act now. So we have procedures in place when somebody indicates they've been convicted of a felony that we have to follow. So we are suggesting this be deleted. Number 3, under enforcement, upon agreement, the executive director and the board legal counsel are authorized to request investigation on cases without initially presenting to the enforcement committee. As a matter of procedure with the standard legal operating procedure within the department, that's just common. They come in and legal evaluates them for investigation, which happens before it comes to the enforcement committee. So this is counter what the internal policy is, or internal procedure. Enforcement number 4, upon receipt of the signed consent order from the respondent, completion of disciplinary action and payment of civil penalties and or associated fees, the executive director shall sign the order on behalf of the board. The board then authorizes the attorney to close the case. So I do indeed sign these when they come back, but that again is also part of the standard legal operating procedure within the department. So it's not done necessarily because of policy, but because of the standard operating procedure. So we're recommending that be deleted. Under the next section, other administrative matters, board meeting minutes shall be prepared and submitted to the executive director for review and approval. After the director approves the draft, it will be forwarded to the board secretary. The secretary shall communicate any revisions to the director. Changes are made. Drafted minutes shall be sent to each board member prior to the meeting. The minutes should be presented to the board at the next meeting. It's subject to any final revisions submitted by members, voted on for approval. Once approved by the board, the minutes should be signed by the chairman and secretary of the board. Additionally, any required addendums as referred to in the minutes should be attached as a permanent record with the minutes. So we do this, but we didn't feel it was necessary to have a policy on it. It's just what you do. I don't know if there's any thoughts, but we're recommending that that be deleted. Number 2, board members are prohibited from performing peer reviews of other board members on their firms. So this was implemented a very long time ago in 1990 and updated in 2006. I feel like within the peer review program, there would probably be some conflict of interest if one of you was a peer reviewer and was asked by another board member's firm to do that peer review. I think you would probably, within the program itself, there might be a conflict of doing that. I don't know that that's been an issue. This was in effect back when the board had its own peer review program as well. So we're recommending that that be deleted. Number 3, board officers shall serve terms that are limited to 2 consecutive years. So I'm not sure that we've quite been going about this the correct way. So we either need to delete this or we need to clarify, because it could be interpreted a couple of different ways. You can only serve in an officer position for 2 consecutive years, or in the same officer position for 2 years. There is nothing in law that restricts service on a committee. The law states that the board may have committees, and that's about it. So we are recommending that this be deleted, but as you might imagine, that could mean somebody would serve in the same officer position for a number of years. So that it's up to you whether you're.
Haven't we done that in like?
Yeah,
I think
we've done that.
unfortunately,
I thought, well, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's happened without me thinking about it.
But the board, I think what we should retain is the practice of the board each year organizing itself and electing officers as it sees fit.
Yeah, yes.
And that's not going to change.
And that actually states that each year the board shall elect officers. So that is required to be done.
Okay.
Is that a rule?
I believe it's a statute.
Okay. So then maybe it's fine if we just delete this and go by the rules. Sounds like.
Oh, yeah, I started to talk about committees. I'm sorry, Kevin, that had not much to do with this. The board may have committees, but that was not part of this. Sorry about that. Okay, and 4.1, or individuals seeking to have a name change shall submit an original certified copy of the legal document authorizing the change. The executive director shall have the discretion to approve changes without the original certified copy if other substantive evidence is obtained. So notification of a name change is required in the rule, but it does not say in what manner. So this clarifies that we would require a legal document in order to change your name. And I just feel more comfortable having that be the requirement. And again, if there's some sort of extenuating circumstance and we can maybe get an affidavit or something, if there's a legal document not available for some reason, I just don't want to be changing names with just an email, will you please change my name? So I'd like to keep that one. The next one, upon receipt of a list of the Department of Human Services, the notice of suspension is to be issued to individuals who are determined by the Department of Human Services as not being in compliance with an order of child support. The notice of suspension is to be issued to individuals who are not in compliance with an order of child support. The notice informs the individual that their professional license has been suspended and will remain suspended until such time as the individual comes into compliance with the order of child support. The Department of Human Services will then issue a release to the board, and the suspension will be lifted upon payment of a $5 processing fee to be paid by the licensee. So this entire section here is laid out in statute, and that covers the authority. We can't change the process as laid out in that statute. So we have to issue the suspension if we receive notice. The one thing that I don't believe is in that statute is the $5 processing fee, but we have historically not been doing that.
This is covered, and we do revoke.
We do this, and we're required to by law.
Okay, good, perfect.
Yeah.
That's all that's.
Also, just so the board is aware, we also do it for default of student loans, is also a requirement in state law. If we receive notice that you are in default, we must suspend your license. The next section, application fees are non-refundable and will revert to the general fund of the board after 6 months of inactivity within the file. So this should have been stricken through. I think I updated the one on the iPads, but we have to delete it. And if you all like the 6 months, we need a rule change because the rule indicates a year. So this policy was more restrictive than the rule. And we've been following the rule because that's really our guide. So again, that would require a rule change if we wanted to keep that one. So the end of the document indicates the 3 items that we wanted to keep. And based on the conversation so far, we need to update that second one related to the CPE audit with those minor adjustments. And just to restate the ones we're wanting to keep is that CPA exam applicants that have been convicted of a felony may submit the additional information to the board or its designated for review and determination of eligibility subject to the Fresh Start Act prior to sitting for the exam. The second one is during each renewal period, 10% of active licensees, a minimum of 10% of active licensees will be selected for a full CPE audit. Furthermore, staff shall have the authority to request additional information and documentation from any licensee. Failure to provide the requested documentation shall result in disallowance of associated CPE hours. And the third one is other administrative matters. Individuals seeking to have a name change shall submit an original certified copy of the legal document authorizing the change. The director has the discretion to approve changes without the original certified copy if other substantive evidence is obtained.
One quick question on number 1. It talks about that they may submit, but what's our responsibility on that? Or if they submit additional information about a felony, then how do we process from there?
Yeah, so usually what happens in these instances, we actually had someone who wanted to sit for the exam and they submitted their documentation. And then legal, the statute, that's completely apart from the accountancy statute. It goes through different factors, and legal will then prepare a memorandum that will set out and provide our opinion whether or not that conviction is related to the profession and would interfere or with that applicant's ability. And then from that point, they would, we would give that memorandum to all of you, and the board would then tell the person if that specific conviction, that's
Would
not,
disqualify them?
yes. If
So,
they're
I mean,
not
that
the-
could be a long time.
What do you mean?
If they have to get them, if the applicant submits the information and then legal reviews it and then has to bring it before us in a meeting to see how we would treat it. Could we make Wendy, the executive director, a person that can, I mean, I feel confident she would know how we would respond.
I think some of these can get actually pretty sticky, and so it is a matter that needs to come before the board.
Okay.
Not that, I mean, I totally trust Wendy's judgment, but you know what I mean. Just because you wouldn't want to look back and then half the board says, well, I think X conviction does apply to the profession, and it's something that you all would need to vote on. But I mean, if you meet quarterly, then
Okay.
the turnaround on the memo within legal is pretty quick.
Oh, okay.
It's not something that takes a long time. I do it for other boards, and you kind of have a formula that you plug into. And
I am certain that Wendy would have a better idea than I would. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any problem bringing it to you at whatever your next meeting was. I mean, unless it was received yesterday, and even then, she can work quick. So we would make every attempt to give them the chance to be as quick as we could.
I think my main concern there is just I don't want it to be just another hurdle. That person is already, it's called the fresh start. But if you got to wait, 3 or 4 months to get something.
well, I mean, if you look at it this way, though, our statute says, that you all have the discretion to deny if they do have a felony, and so it's actually providing them
An opportunity.
an avenue.
Okay.
Because then say they go through all that, that long process, and they sit for the exam. You say, sorry, we're going to deny. Well, the Fresh Start Act allows them, the opportunity to get a decision before even taking the exam.
Which is on our other one about the people and their student loans, that they wouldn't have a CPA license if they weren't allowed to get their degree, and the very fact that they're not paying their student loan anyway. That would be
people have their student loans till they're in their 60s. Some people do.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I paid for 100% of mine and no financial aid or anything myself, but it didn't take me that long. I mean,
No, but some people would become licensed and still have student loan debt for a number of years. So if you are an active CPA and then you default on your student loans, you could be subject to suspension of your license if you default.
I think that's a good thing. Don't you? Or, I mean, I guess I'm not understanding why we wouldn't.
I mean, it's a law right now.
Yeah.
So it has been the legislature's opinion as well.
Okay.
There's varying opinions about that. But.
So, based on all the discussion that we've had, it seems like we're in agreement with what the staff is proposing to include the policy statements related to the that's summarized on your handout, subject to the one change in number 2 that Wendy went over. So, do we need any more discussion, or are we ready to, do we need a motion to accept?
I think that would be in order.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. We had a motion and a second, so I think we're all in agreement to accept the policy changes that you suggested, and that's what we'll propose to the full board tomorrow.
Vote.
Yeah, we'll have to call the roll
Oh,
because of the
okay, call
telephonic
the roll.
participants.
Oh, no one's on the phone on that committee.
Okay, all
Okay.
right.
So we're good. Wendy, I think we had one other item that I don't remember what it was. It seems like.
Oh, I was just going to update on the continuous testing rule, but we
Okay.
did that earlier.
Okay. Then that's all for our committee.
Thank you so much, Janet. I appreciate that and appreciate everybody's attention, and also Wendy and staff, the legwork that went into trying to prune our policy statements. The last committee that we have is the Executive Committee, and the primary items on that are just an overview of our fiscal year 20 year-to-date financial results and our travel expense detail. And Wendy, would you care to highlight anything from the reports that were in the read-ahead packet?
Okay, so just to give an overview real quick, our revenue so far for the year, this is for the fiscal year began July 1 of 19, and this is through the month end of November 19. So our revenue was at $214,920. Our expenses at $361,125, leaving us at a deficit of $146,205, which is common this time of year because we have not made it through the renewal season, which is the bulk of our revenue. However, one of the things that I brought up to Kevin when we talked about this is that our gross revenue is down significantly. It's down 34% to the prior year. And it was down 41% in November 19 alone to the prior year. To me, it appears to be due to folks delaying the renewal of their license because they had not completed their CPE. And I showed this by also pulling the applications during that same period of time, and they were down about roughly the same percentage. So I feel comfortable with the fact that we're going to see that a big increase in revenue in December and probably January, as well as people finish up their CPE and renew their licenses. So fingers crossed that that's not a real problem. Our case and complaint was right in line with where it has been. Let's see, some of the other items to note on here. Employee benefits are up a little bit, but salaries are up a little bit as well. So we'll just keep an eye on that one. Longevity is in line. Travel's been in line. That includes our board meetings for July and October and NASBA's Eastern Regional meeting. So we are still seeing limited need for Sherry to travel with regards to investigations. She's been able to do a lot with phone interviews and that type of thing. Communications and shipping. Postal charges are included here, mainly renewal certificates and certified mail, along with wall certificates. Third-party professional and administrative services. That covers shredding, formal hearings, some of those costs, NASBA dues, credit card processing, GPS, and other third-party items. Also to note, Todd Skelton's travel is not going to be included under travel. It's going to be included under third-party professional services. And so that is why you see a little bit of a decline in travel and maybe a little bit higher under this line item. Supplies and furniture, typical. Rentals and insurance, typical. We are seeing some savings on copier because we have pooled that expense now with our alternative work solutions. But
Wendy, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Why is Todd's travel somewhere different than everybody else?
He is not collecting the $50 per diem per meeting, so he's not considered an employee, so it just happens to fall in a different section.
Save state money, that's great.
There you go. I don't know. I don't know what his reason is or whether he wants to share it.
I just happy to share later if somebody has a question, but
Saving the state money. Good.
I'm not sure we can share later.
Yeah. Okay, so motor vehicle operation, that's really anytime a car rental takes place or something as we bought a hands-free device for Sherry's car due to the law change in July. Awards, we have nothing to note there yet this year. Employee training, that is typically our registration fees for any NASBA events and any CPE for professional staff. Computer-related items, technology purchases are normally seen here. And this year, our Zendesk charges are included here, so you're seeing an increase there over the prior year. And so Zendesk is the platform we use to take calls at the customer service and email tickets. So it stores all of that information, and we have to pay for that. And that for our board is $37.44 for the year. And last year that it was absorbed in cost back. So there's just a different way of applying that this year. So there's a little bit of an increase there. In state professional services, this is telephone, IT support, specifically for our board, rent allocation, printing, lease on our cars, fuel, and usage charges. We're saving about $2,000 a month on rent, which is why we are down in this particular category by 42%. And our IT costs have been very minimal so far this year. So now we may see some things hit from renewals where we needed some help with IT to fix some of the things that we were having there. So we may see some of that, but otherwise it's been pretty normal. Year-end cost backs are down. I don't know whether we can expect for that to continue or not, but our legal costs have stabilized. We are down $8,700 to the prior year. And our admin cost backs are down $24,000 so far this year, but I'm not sure I expect that to stay that way. I think they're working through some formulas for cost backs. So overall, again, we are down, or we're in the red, 146,000, but I believe after we see the full renewal cycle, we should be in line with where we've been in the past and with budget.
And then on the travel expense detail, any particular highlights, Wendy, there to report out? It looked pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Okay. I think that concludes the action of the executive committee. Any other questions or comments?
I would like to make a comment. Since I've been on the board, I have observed, since Sherry has been with us, I have just noticed a dramatic improvement in the investigations that she's done and how well prepared she is for each meeting. And I just want to say thank you, because it makes our jobs a lot easier, and it had gotten pretty frustrating for me before. And I just want to commend you for doing a great job, because I think you are. But Wendy sees you every day, so it's up to her.
I agree.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate that feedback very much. Tomorrow, our meeting starts at 8:30 in the morning, and is that here in this room or the alternate conference room?
We're in the other room.
Okay.
We have a larger board who had to use this room.
Okay. So we'll see everybody back at 8:30, and we'll adjourn our committee meetings today. Thank you.
Do we have breakfast or no?